You're watching TBPN. Today is Tuesday, April 1st, 2025. We are live from the Temple of Technology, the Fortress of Finance, Jordy, the capital of capital. This show starts now. We got a ton of news. OpenAI is worth $300 billion now. Hermes is going back to their roots and focusing on horse saddles, both equally important stories in the world of technology journalism. We're going to take you through it today. And we have a bunch of great guests for you. We got David Senra coming on the show. Samir from Colin and Samir, we're going to talk about the creator economy. He just did a fantastic interview with Mr. Beast and Mark Zuckerberg, putting two of the greats together.
Where do you go from there?
And it's OpenAI Day. They're raising $40 billion at 300. We got two folks from OpenAI joining the show. Will and Aidan. So we'll talk to them, probably not about the financing, probably about the product and all the technology that they're building, but we're very excited for that. Anyway.
We'll be ranking their top 5,000 Ghibli memes.
Yes, and we'll be pressuring them into buying watches on bezel.
That's right.
Undoubtedly. Anyway, let's kick it off. Do you have any breaking news? I think we should address, we are officially at 32,000 followers, right? We have doubled
Another
again.
doubling.
Another doubling.
Another doubling.
The show is bigger than ever. We're taking over. So we're at 32.3 now. And that means that it's a Dom Perignon episode technically,
right.
But we are shifting our strategy. So these Dom Perignon episodes now are in partnership with ZBiotics. One of my friends' companies, actually. They are not an official sponsor, but I do love ZBiotics. And ZBiotics, I actually introduced the founders. Stephen Lamb, I went to high school with. I met Zach, the CEO, through YC. I think he did the early YC, like the startup school, sent out an email, hey, I'm looking for people. And Stephen was looking for a co-founder wanting to get in the startup community. Kind of introduced them, and they hit it off. And they've been running this company for... like half a decade now. It's great.
Crazy.
Almost a decade. I guess they went through YC, same.
And people are really obsessed with this product.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So if you're not familiar, ZBiotics, it's a pre-alcohol probiotic drink designed specifically to kill hangovers, basically. It's hugely popular at weddings. People buy these and they hand them out to all their guests. You take them. It can't make up for a lack of sleep, so you will be tired, but it really does a great job of like killing that like terrible feeling.
No, and it's great. And if we were going to be drinking this bottle of champagne today, it would be perfect because it's the middle of the day. You don't want to go home at the end of the day with a hangover.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so we want to shift from drinking the Dom Perignon on stream to giving away bottles of Dom Perignon.
And this Dom actually has a sponsor itself, Slow Ventures.
Oh yes, Slow Ventures.
They sent it to us.
They sent this to us.
Good friends of the show.
So thank you to Slow. So we're gonna pass it on.
Well,
we're
also,
gonna regift
if it goes to a founder, that's kind of it's kind of regifting can be a little bit taboo, but in this case. It's really a celebration.
I think you're a founder. You listen to this. You listen to the show. You win the bottle of Dom Perignon, and then you send this to Sam Lesson. And it'd be like, hey, I want to pitch you, and it's just a snake eating its tail, an Ouroboros of Dom Perignon.
What do we?
This could be the most storied bottle.
How are we going to give it away?
I wanted to see a super creative 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I think that's fun. If you've already left one, get a friend's phone. Leave another one.
That's right.
Screenshot it. Send it to us. Just tweet it at us. And the one that we think is the most funny, we'll get in touch and mail this to you. How about that?
Boom. Perfect.
You got to be over 21,
Message,
obviously. And
at TBPN.
it's kind of a contest, so I guess there's no cost to enter. No purchase necessary.
Yeah.
But I guess this isn't a purchase anyway. So
yeah.
I don't know. Just please don't sue us. Like, we're just trying to give out a bottle of Dom. It's fun. I don't know. People get worried about these like contests. Like, they need to be like regulated and stuff. Like I buy it. I want to be a good Samaritan.
Well, they're not regulating Dom giveaways yet.
They're not yet. But if we get any bigger, they might. Anyway, let's go through the SoftBank deal. OpenAI. Masayoshi Son got the deal done, is putting in $10 billion.
Our leverage king.
Leverage king. Yeah, and people were like, oh, he's using debt. So the Wall Street Journal has this article, this hit piece against debt, which we love here. They say, how is SoftBank funding its mega investment in OpenAI? A lot of debt. Like, that's a bad thing. Baby, he's going long. He's going turbo long. We love it. We love to see it. Masayoshi Son's company said the first $10 billion would be financed by borrowing from Japanese bank Mizuho and other lenders. Of course, we've seen this stuff before, and SoftBank has a lot of assets, so it actually makes sense. But we'll talk about how they're collateralizing it in a little bit. What you got?
No, I was going to say, so to be clear, this is a staged investment.
Yes.
They're doing $10 billion now.
And $30 billion in
basically
2026.
Seemingly entirely from Mizuho, and a handful of other lenders, to be completed this month, with the remaining 30 to come by the beginning of next year. So Masa is going to be under. This guy likes to put himself under pressure.
Yeah.
He's going to be under pressure for the rest of the year, knowing he's got has this sort of $30 billion sort of investment that he needs to make.
Yeah,
that he needs to come up with some combination of debt and equity.
It is funny because couldn't OpenAI have just gone to Mizuho directly and gotten debt if they wanted debt? But now they have equity on they have preferred equity on their balance sheet, and Masa has the debt.
Yeah, no,
it's amazing.
It's great for OpenAI.
Potentially, everyone wins, right? Like if OpenAI does really well, Mizuho gets paid back. They want interest. They want to be paid back. Masa sees the upside, and OpenAI doesn't have any debt on their balance sheet. It's like it's beautiful. This is capitalism, baby. I love it.
Well, yeah, and to be clear, to give Masa some credit, couldn't he fund this entirely by selling off some of his ARM holdings?
For sure. Yeah.
So,
but this deal is the largest investment ever in a startup. We seriously need a bigger gong. Hold on to that gong. There we go. We got to hit the gong hard for this one. This is a big deal.
Whatever anybody has to say about Sam, the guy knows how to do deals.
This was the whole thesis of OpenAI from day one. It's like Greg Brockman, the CTO of Stripe, Sam Altman, he's invested in a billion things, made so much money. It's like the founding team was really, really like incredible. And if your whole thesis is just like bet on founders, like Sam, pretty good at making money. Like, it's not that crazy.
This is like, I feel like your favorite investments are always into companies where the founder is just like, you can tell like they're good at making money.
He's commercial. He's commercial. Like he doesn't like losing money. And I think that's great. And I think that's exactly what you want. And that's why I'm so excited about not being a nonprofit anymore. This clearly is a consumer tech company. It needs to be a for-profit. And when you think about like, could this be the next Google? Could this be the next, like ChatGPT for the last year has been on the home row of my app, on the home row of my iPhone. Yeah. And like, it's not because like I'm shilling for Sam or something. It's just like, it's a useful product. It needs to be there. And like, when I think about what else is in the home row, it's like Google, Apple, and OpenAI. And so like, can it get to, hundreds of billions of dollars of valuation? Like, sure, it seems fine. But I mean, I'm sure there'll be a lot of good takes about where this could go wrong. Obviously, it is a very high valuation. Obviously, when Moss is buying, Sam Lessin says you want to be selling. Who knows? I'm just excited to see a lot of money change hands and a lot of debt stack up. Together with SoftBank's pledge to lead the $100 billion Stargate cloud computing initiative with OpenAI, the investment marks a massive bet on the artificial intelligence startup. It intertwines the fortunes of SoftBank with a company that expects to lose billions of dollars for years to come. The hope is that OpenAI emerges as the leader of the pack in a race to spread artificial intelligence throughout society and commerce, a market that many believe could be worth trillions of dollars a year. This is what Sam was saying about, like, it's either worth 0 or $1 trillion. And so, like, you average that out and you're like, yeah, $500 billion.
Yeah. And it's hard to do a discounted cash flow analysis of that binary of an outcome.
I mean, this is one of Peter Thiel's takes is like when they were doing the DCF on Google, and Andrew Reed talked about this too, like they didn't have the spreadsheets go out far enough to understand that, oh yeah, if you really play out this trend, like Apple and Google, these companies could be throwing off like hundreds of billions of dollars of cash a year. And the numbers just kept going up. They never got to that. And no matter how far you went out, if you discounted it back, it would have been a much bigger number, but no one was really thinking that long term. Now people are like...
And that's when tech decided to say, no thanks, finance. We're done. We're done with you. We're done with your models.
Yep.
It's purely vibe
investing. And now tech has gone the other direction, which is like, oh, this thing isn't going to make money for 2 decades and then it'll make $1 trillion. Like, sure, I'll pay you $1 trillion right now. And maybe we've gone too far. Who knows? We will see. But good luck to everyone involved, and congratulations to all the OpenAI shareholders and employees who seem to be doing very well right now.
Yes. You have to imagine a good amount of this is going to secondary. You know, even if it's a small percentage relative, even if it's $500 million.
Yep.
It's still pretty meaningful for
SoftBank always delivering great quotes. The statement says, the information revolution has now entered a new phase led by artificial intelligence, and called its partner, OpenAI, its partner closest to achieving AGI, in which computers operate on the level of humans. And Sam was tweeting about this. He's saying, like, AGI has been achieved externally, and it's unclear. I think he might just be April Fool's joking. I don't know. But clearly the product works. People like the images. People like the text responses. People like deep research. I like these products, and I think people will continue to use them.
Yep.
Obviously, it's extremely competitive, and there are several $100 billion plus efforts now to win this war.
Yep.
And it's the greatest time to be a podcaster in history.
The edge that OpenAI has is if you talk to people that aren't as terminally online as the rest of us, they will tell you, I love OpenAI. I don't just like it and use it. They have a passion for it, just as everyday consumers.
Yeah. And they'll be like,
and it's
Sam
hard
who?
to get them like, oh,
Helen
if you tell
Toner
somebody it's like OpenAI, they're going to say like, but I love OpenAI already.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, no, but it's 2 points better on MMLU. And they're like, I don't know what that is.
This one won an IMO gold medal.
Yeah.
They're like,
What's that? Yeah, it is very funny. SoftBank is taking a lot of risks for a piece of OpenAI. Ratings agency S&P Global said Tuesday that SoftBank's financial condition will likely deteriorate as a result of the OpenAI investment, and that it plans to add debt that could lead the agency to consider downgrading SoftBank's ratings. None of the startups with early leads in generative AI have shown that they can operate profitably. I don't know how true that is. Like, you could probably look at the GPT-4 training run and amortize just that. But yes, I mean, on a quarter-to-quarter basis, these companies aren't profitable. So in terms of like the overall business, it's a good point. And the sector is pouring tens of billions of dollars into data centers based on assumptions not yet proven of a future in which AI rapidly permeates the globe. It feels like it already is rapidly permeating, but I guess it's up for debate. Early tech leaders often falter, a point SoftBank learned when it made .com era bet that Yahoo would be the dominant force in search. The background debt has been a common feature of Sohn's risk-heavy strategy. The CEO borrowed heavily for the company's successful acquisitions of Vodafone's Japanese unit and chip design company ARM. More recently, SoftBank has been licking its wounds from piling tens of billions of dollars into startups just before values plunged in 2021, and Sohn repeatedly said SoftBank would stay on defense. Now, having pivoted to offense, SoftBank ramped up spending, including a $6.5 billion acquisition of chip startup Ampere.
Go back and listen to our deep dive on Masa and SoftBank in generally. It's very fun and fascinating. I think what people fail to consider is that Masa is a gambler, and he's not oblivious to the risks that he takes, but he's constantly searching for that next absolute banger.
Totally.
And there's a very good, there's plenty of non-technical but powerful vibes-based analysis that you could do to make the case that this could very well be a fantastic outcome for SoftBank. So
it's one or the other. It's either a good or a bad investment. It's probably
we looked at the
not
numbers.
neutral.
We talked to the experts, and we determined that it's going to be either good or bad.
Yeah, it's going to be either good or bad. You heard it here first, folks. But it's going to be extremely good if you participate in that secondary deal, and then you head over to getbezel.com and you shop for over 24,500 luxury watches. I can't imagine a more AGI resistant asset than the luxury watch. They're not making any more FP Journes after
and they're
ASI
not making
drops.
any more Rolexes or Pateks. No, I'm just saying the actual companies themselves.
Sure.
If you want to make the next Rolex, you have to go back 100 plus years ago and start it. Yeah. At least if you want to run it today.
Yeah, exactly.
If you want to run what could be the next Rolex but not be alive for when it becomes said asset, then Godspeed.
So
but go to
getbezel.com. And can we just give a shout out to the graphics department? We're a small team here, but I think it's incredible what we can do. I mean, we're just shy of 75 people now, and they have really been over delivering. And I really love the new tickers. Of course, we're sponsored by Public. We have the Public stock ticker there, but we also got the Polymarket ticker. And we hope you're enjoying staying up to date on what tech markets are going on.
It's such a beautiful way to understand the world.
It is.
And we should actually get some bezel. We should get
watch listings. I just want more tickers.
We need more tickers.
Yeah.
So
I think every sponsor gets a ticker. It's just
over at Eventually, it's just 99% ticker.
I think so.
But to close it out, go to getbezel.com. Download the app. The app is fantastic. We are DAUs. And you should be too.
And it's like the greatest time in history to be a watch fan because it's there's a major watch announcement. The watch world is exploding with new news.
That's right.
Rolex launched the Land Dweller.
Yep.
Patek launched a Complications watch that's worth over $1 million. AEP has made some updates. A lot of things are launching. So I wanted to highlight this Polo 79 in white gold from Piaget. It's about $100,000 watch, but I think it's a lot of watch for that money.
It certainly
it's a lot of money, but it's a lot of watch.
It's a lot of money, but it's a lot of watch.
And remember, I mean, you can drive a GT3 RS, but you can't take a GT3 RS into a board meeting.
That's right.
So
that's right. Many people have said this.
You can't take a 911 into a board meeting, but you can take your Piaget Polo.
If you drive your
79
GT3 RS into a board meeting, you will get arrested.
You will get arrested. Do
not do it.
Except I think more Sand Hill Road VC firms should have massive roll-up doors for board meetings if you want to drive
just drive your car in.
I think you should be able to drive in like a drive up, and you should just be able to roll down your window and be like, yeah, KPIs were good. Okay. We'll be raising in Q3. Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to get
out
of here
next quarter. Well, yeah, so we're in the hunt for a new studio.
Yep.
And
roll-up doors
are not like a deal breaker, but they're certainly
nice to have.
Nice to have.
For sure. It's a nice to have. Anyway, we're going to have Quaid from Bezel, the CEO, on the show tomorrow to break down exactly what's happening in the watch world. I follow all this stuff.
He's in Europe right now.
And I noticed I have the worst takes because I'll see a new watch drop and I'll be like, this is amazing. I want this immediately. And then he'll be like, that's the most controversial watch that's ever launched. Everyone in the watch world hates it. Like you have like the most contrarian position. I'm like, I'm kind of fine with that. Like I don't really mind because I'm like dipping my toe in. I know the brands, I know the different models, but I'm not like, in the discourse.
We're watch enjoyers. We're not watch experts.
Exactly.
Big difference.
Yeah. So I would gladly wear a knockoff Royal Oak from Rolex called the Land Dweller.
Yeah.
I think it looks great. Anyway, let's stay with OpenAI and move on to an excerpt from a book that's coming out on OpenAI. There's a segment in the Wall Street Journal. It's a long read.
And this is different than Ashley Vance's OpenAI book?
It is. And this is an interesting... I'll give my take at like the meta level. Like this reporter, I don't remember who actually wrote this. It's from a book that's coming out in a few weeks. Adapted from, it's called The Optimist, Sam Altman, OpenAI, and the Race to Invent the Future by Keech Hagee. It will be published on May 20th, 2025. And I'm sure it'll be an interesting read. It is incredibly well sourced. So this writer, this author, was able to get insider accounts of like private dinners between Peter Thiel and Sam Altman. Like very, like you've been to some of these parties, like people don't love talking to the press that go to those parties. Like it's pretty rare.
Well, and the way they're positioning this dinner just from the graphic is that it was actually just a dinner between the two of them.
It was a birthday party. There were other people there, but still it's like, it's crazy that this like leaked at all. So it's incredibly well sourced, and there's very interesting facts and quotes that bubble up in this story that we'll kind of go through today. But I think the analysis is god awful. And so, Truth Zone time. It's definitely Truth Zone. It's not even Truth Zone. Like I think the facts are correct. I think it's more just like the follow-up questions that are obvious to ask if you're in tech. You can put takes
in the Truth Zone.
The takes are need to be put in the Truth Zone. Anyway, let's read through this because it's just a beautifully written. I mean, it's like a great writer, great author.
I'll kick it off.
Yeah.
On a balmy mid-November evening in 2023, billionaire venture capitalist Peter Thiel threw a birthday party for his husband at Yes, an avant-garde Japanese restaurant located in a century-old converted bank building in Los Angeles' Arts District, not far from where we are at this moment.
Yeah.
Seated next to him was his friend Sam Altman. Thiel had backed Altman's first venture fund more than a decade before and remained a mentor to the younger investor when Altman became the face of the artificial intelligence revolution as the chief executive of OpenAI. OpenAI's instantly viral launch of ChatGPT in November 2022 had propelled tech stocks to one of their best years in decades. Yet Thiel was worried. Years before he met Altman, Thiel had taken another AI-obsessed prodigy named Eliezer Yudkowsky under his wing, funding his institute, which pushed to make sure that any AI smarter than humans would be friendly to its maker. That March, Yudkowsky had argued in Time magazine that unless the current wave of AI research was halted, literally everyone on Earth will die. You don't understand how Eliezer has programmed half the people in your company to believe in that stuff, Thiel warned Altman. You need to take this more seriously. You want to take it over?
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's a fascinating history. I mean, Altman's first venture fund was called Hydrazine Capital, I believe. He was actually an investor in my first company. And hydrazine, I haven't asked Sam if this is the reference, but hydrazine is rocket fuel, but it's also extremely toxic and will like kill you if you breathe it. And so there's this weird, I like to think that it's this weird like double entendre about like venture capital can accelerate your business, but it can also kill your business. It's kind of beautiful. Anyway, underreported, Sam is like so known for OpenAI now. I think people forget that he ran a very, very successful venture fund and made some incredible investments during that time. And then also what's missing from this is that Peter Thiel is listed on Wikipedia as a co-founder of OpenAI and was one of the initial backers. Obviously, Elon was a major, major backer, and then has fought, and there's all this like controversy there. So like that has become the bigger story, but the initial team behind OpenAI was crazy. I mean, it was a YC research project, so it was heavily YC influenced, and YC actually has a stake in OpenAI now that must be worth a ton now. And PG famously like found out about that on Twitter because he was asking someone, and they were like, "Don't you own a stake?" And he was like, "Yeah, I just asked legal, and we actually do." It was very funny. But yeah, I mean, they go way back. And at one point, Peter Thiel had been an advisor to YC, and Sam Altman was running YC, and Sam brought Peter in, and I think they did a podcast interview together, and they've talked about each other. So there's just a lot of like history here that's kind of interesting. So moving on, Altman picked at his vegetarian dish and tried not to roll his eyes. This was not the first dinner where Thiel had warned him that the company had been taken over by VEAs, by which he meant people who subscribed to effective altruism. EA had lately pivoted from trying to end global poverty, which was what we saw SBF doing in the EA thing. The whole idea was like mosquito nets. We got to get mosquito nets because mosquito nets are super cheap and they stop malaria. And so for just like $1, you can save someone's life, and it's the highest ROI on reducing human suffering versus if you're dealing with like Alzheimer's treatments, like older people, very expensive, mosquito nets are really cheap. And so EAs were originally very focused on ending global poverty. Then they kind of pivoted to trying to prevent runaway AI from murdering humanity. Thiel had repeatedly predicted that the AI safety people would destroy OpenAI. Well, it was kind of true of Elon, but we got rid of Elon. Sam responded at the dinner, referring to the messy 2018 split with his co-founder Elon Musk.
They did not fully get rid of Elon.
So true. Who once referred to the attempt to create artificial intelligence as summoning the demon. That's a great Elon quote. I love it. And I mean, it's the whole nuance here, which is like everyone is somewhat AGI pilled, somewhat AGI doomer. No one has a PDoom of 0. No one has a PDoom of 100. Everyone's kind of on this gradient, but there's just a question of like, how do you deal with that risk, and is it with more innovation and building a more positive future, like the Thielian optimist, like definite optimism, and hey, okay, we need to build an AI that doesn't kill us, versus the kind of indefinite pessimism of Eliezer Yudkowsky, which is like it's going to happen no matter what. There's nothing we can do.
Give me money for research.
Yes.
Give me money for my institute.
Yes. Nearly 800 OpenAI employees have been riding a rocket ship, and we're about to have the chance to buy beachfront second homes. Let's hear it for some beachfront second homes, folks. We love beachfront second homes on this show.
Even if you're not in the position of those 800 OpenAI employees, you can go to wander.com.
Yeah, and you can rent a beachfront second home. Fantastic.
By the day. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You can just get homes by the day.
By the day.
Fantastic innovation.
Yes.
Luxury homes by the day.
By the day.
Hyper fractionalized.
Fractionalized. I knew you were going to say it. And so there was a tender offer going on at the time, valuing the company at $86 billion. There was no need to panic. So all the OpenAI employees are very happy. At least it seemed that they were. Altman, at 38 years old, was wrapping up the best year of a charmed career, a year in which he became a household name, met with presidents and prime ministers around the world, and most importantly, within the value system of Silicon Valley, delivered a new technology that seemed like it was very possibly going to change everything. And that really is true. Like OpenAI, yes, the Transformer paper was written at Google. Yes, like other people were working on language models, but OpenAI was the company that really went full scale scaled this thing up, and then also productized it, and also figured out like, hey, people just want a chatbot.
They verticalized research through product, and they were the first to do that in a really, really meaningful way.
And clearly whatever was going on at Google was not allowing for that verticalization. Yeah. There were fantastic researchers and fantastic product people selling ads and making YouTube a great product. They were not talking to each other.
Yeah.
And so, but as the two investing partners celebrated beneath the exposed rafters of LA's hottest new restaurant, 4 members of OpenAI's 6-person board, including 2 with direct ties to the EA community, were holding secret video meetings, and they were deciding whether they should fire Sam Altman, though not because of EA. This account is based on interviews with dozens of people who lived through one of the wildest business stories of all time, the sudden firing of the CEO of the hottest tech company on the planet, and his reinstatement just days later. At the center was a mercurial leader who kept everyone around him inspired by his technological vision, but also at times confused and unsettled by his web of secrets and misdirections. From the start, OpenAI was set up to be a different kind of tech company, one governed by a nonprofit board with a duty not to shareholders, but to humanity. Altman had shocked lawmakers earlier in the year when he told them under oath that he owned no equity in the company he co-founded, which of course was true, but very much mocked because the idea of somebody doing something not for money is
the
kind of
senator
silly, I
with
guess.
the line saying, "You need an agent."
You need an agent. Yeah, that's great. He agreed to the unprecedented arrangement to be on the board, which required a majority of directors to have no financial ties to the company, of course, because it's this nonprofit structure. In June 2023, he told Bloomberg TV, "The board can fire me, and that's important." Behind the scenes, the board was finding to its growing frustration that Altman really called the shots, of course, through like soft power, not through legal means or voting shares or any. And it's an entirely new way of controlling a company.
It's a really great way to expose that you don't actually understand the company, because I'm sure if you went to the OpenAI office and talked to anybody, you would find out almost immediately that Sam did in fact call all the shots.
Of course. And there's a lot of just
CEO does.
This is like what we're talking about with like, there's intelligence, and Sam is intelligent, but there's other intelligent people around the table. It's really will and agency and vision and coordination and communication and all these like EQ things that really push an organization forward. And there are tons of smart people at Google. They couldn't launch a chatbot faster than OpenAI somehow. And it's like, why is that? It's probably not because they didn't think of it. It's probably not because of a lack of intelligence. It's a lack of volition. For the past year, the board had been deadlocked over which AI safety expert to add to its ranks. The board interviewed Ajaya Kotra, an AI safety expert at the EA charity Open Philanthropy, but the process stalled largely due to foot dragging by Altman and his co-founder Greg Brockman, who is also on the board. Altman countered with his own suggestion. There was a bit of a power struggle, said Brian Chesky, the Airbnb CEO, who's one of the prospective board members Altman suggested. There was this basic thing that if Sam said the name, they must be loyal to Sam, so therefore the board is going to say no. The dynamics got more contentious after 3 board members in the pro-Altman camp stepped down in quick succession in early 2023 over various conflicts of interest. That left 6 people on the board, on the nonprofit board that govern the for-profit AI juggernaut. And you're getting this weird dynamic where the nonprofit board is set up to just like, hey, we just want to do research and advocate for AI safety. But all of a sudden we've birthed this $300 billion.
The demon.
The demon is really just a consumer tech company, I guess.
Yeah. Consumer applications, actually.
Yeah. Just Apple.
Your mother was right.
Your mother was right. Altman and his close ally Brockman, their fellow co-founder Ilya Sutskever, and 3 independent directors. These were the independent directors were Adam D'Angelo, the CEO of Quora and a former Facebook executive, Helen Toner, the director of strategy for Georgetown Center of Security and Emerging Technology and a veteran of Open Philanthropy, and Tasha McCauley, a former tech CEO and member of the UK board of EA charity Effective Ventures, and I believe the wife of a celebrity, right? Tasha McCauley. She's the wife of, I forget who. Someone who is in Looper.
Joseph
Gordon-Levitt. That's right. Yeah. Concerns about corporate governance and the board's ability to oversee Altman became much more urgent for several board members after they saw a demo of GPT-4, a more powerful AI that could ace the AP biology test in summer of 2022. God forbid.
God forbid.
The AP biology test gets aced. It's over for us.
It's over.
It's not a neurotic statement.
That was humanity's final exam.
Yes.
The real one.
Yes, it's over. Once you can ace
AP
Bio. Once you understand AP Bio, you can do anything.
You can reverse engineer anything you want.
Anything you want. I mean, to steel man it, like, you understand bio, maybe you understand bioweapons, maybe you help someone in the basement create a new smallpox and create some, like, there are guardrails that need to be on these things, obviously. But it's, it's a little bit overblown, I think. Things like ChatGPT and GPT-4 were meaningful shifts toward the board realizing that the stakes are getting higher. Here, Toner said, it's not like we are all going to die tomorrow, but the board needs to be functioning well. And that's a fair critique. Like the structure of the company was not aligned with what was happening at the company. Yeah. At the same time, it feels like they're acting like everyone was going to die tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And what we actually talked about this before we got on air, but I think if you really, if they wanted to have a sort of strong case for their actions, there should have been sort of information being fed to them from active members of the research team and the team broadly saying, hey, we're very worried about this. It's not just a cute chat app that's going to go viral. This could sort of snowball into something else, but it seems like they were doing their sort of own vibes-based analysis of the situation, and just frustration, feeling like having an inflated sense of self-importance when realizing they weren't a real player in the game.
I completely agree. So, I mean, most of the board was non-technical, not actually interfacing with the changes at a technical level that were happening in the iterations of the GPT models. Yes, they were scaling up, but how were they doing on evals? How were these systems integrated? What systems did these models have access to? All of those things. Completely agree with that. The other thing is like what you're advocating for is like a whistleblower program, which kind of exists in every company, like if you've ever been on a board and some low-level employee emails you, like it's probably not good. They're probably complaining about something, and a lot of times they have good points. What was interesting is that there was a story that came out that OpenAI had some really onerous exit process where if you left and you didn't sign like an NDA, they could claw back some of your equity. And everyone was like, this is terrible. And I was like, yeah, it seems like maybe overly aggressive, but it's kind of super aligned with the EAs, because if you actually think that OpenAI's new model is going to kill all of humanity, then your money is worthless, right? And so you should absolutely say, well, the money is useless. Let me go to the media and say what's happening, and then I'll stop it, and then I'll write a book and I'll make money that way. Like there's a million ways to make money if you're a successful whistleblower and you actually do uncover, hey, I'm the person that saved humanity and I can prove it because this model, I have proof that it was going to kill everyone. Yes, I lost my shares in OpenAI, but it doesn't matter because I saved the world. And what would be more edifying and then also financially rewarding over the long term than saving humanity?
Ben would go to the press and say, John and Jordy are considering going to 8 hours a day of live streaming, which I think might, massively slow GDP growth or potentially even go negative because people just stop, all work and just, listen to the show. Yeah. It's a real asymmetric risk.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. I mean, we've advocated for podcast safety very significantly, and potentially even creating like a government
regulatory capture
and like monopoly.
Basically there should be 10,000% tariffs on podcasts.
There should be like an FDA for podcasting where you have to submit an application with what your show is about, and then you get approved. It takes years, costs hundreds of millions of dollars. Exactly. And then you can't just have any willy-nilly podcast just drop an RSS feed.
Yeah. Just like pharmaceuticals, we don't want anybody coming to market with a new pharmaceutical.
I completely agree. This makes so much sense.
Shouldn't have anyone just coming to market with
the podcast for sure. Anyway, let's move on to equally ridiculous things. Toner and Macaulay had already begun to lose trust in Altman to review new products. And this is interesting because we haven't actually heard before how the safety process worked within OpenAI. Yep. And they do a good job breaking it down here. So to review new products for risks before they were released. And again, I agree that when you're launching new products, like you should assess them for safety. Even Instagram, when they launch a new algorithm, they should be like, is this promoting anorexia? Is this promoting extreme content or not? And to what degree? Is it making people sad? Is it making people happy? Like, let's understand the impact of the technology that we're building. That's great. And here's how they wound up doing it. So OpenAI had a joint safety committee board with Microsoft, a key backer of OpenAI, that had special access to use its technology and its products. So Microsoft can vend GPT models into Azure and then deliver them into different segments of the Microsoft ecosystem. During one meeting in the winter of 2022, as the board weighed how to release 3 somewhat controversial enhancements to GPT-4, Altman claimed all 3 had been approved by the Joint Safety Board. Toner asked for proof and found that only 1 had actually been approved. And so this is like the smoking gun. Like Sam Altman lied about the approvals. And it's like, okay, like author, follow up. Like, what are the controversial enhancements? Like, I remember what the difference between GPT 3.5 and GPT 4 were. It was context window went from 4K tokens to 32K tokens. They trained on 10 times as many tokens. Like, we saw the small dot and then the big circle, and everyone was scared. I get that everyone was scared, but like, what is the problem? Like GPT-4, now you can do PDF upload. Is that going to kill everyone? Like, what is the problem that you're actually upset about? I understand that, yes, he might have not followed the right rules in this case, but habeas corpus, we have to produce some sort of corpse here. And what is this controversial enhancement to GPT-4? We've all been playing with GPT-4 for years now. It's no big deal. It's been copied, open source. DeepSeek can run it on your phone. You can download it on GitHub, Mistral, and all these GPT-4 level models. What are we worried about? I don't understand. It's so confusing and infuriating that the author didn't dive in deeper and say what were the controversial enhancements? Because to me, it was a controversial lack of enhancements. It was like GPT-4 was great, but it wasn't good enough. It should have had more. I was
Go
like,
bigger.
32K context window, not big enough. What did Google do? They launched a 100K context window. They launched a 1 million token context window. Is that controversial? I don't know, but it's super useful if you're trying to deep dive a book. Like, I don't get it. I'm so confused by this. Anyway, and then this is the really funny thing, because they obviously, like, all the hate's been on Sam. But Microsoft is just like doing crazy stuff this whole time. So around the same time, Microsoft launched a test of the still unreleased GPT-4 in India. And they're just like, yeah, let's just try it in India. Like, who cares? Like, we don't need to ask anyone. Like, let's just do it. This is the first instance of the revolutionary code being released in the wild.
That's not the first time.
They're just like,
Bill Gates.
Let's test it on India.
Bill Gates organizations have
testing
done things like that.
Yeah, it's like, what if it was Microsoft? Like you're afraid of AI safety. Like, what if it had gone wrong and like completely screwed up India? Like, that would be bad, right? It's like so bizarre.
It's also internet products, so
yeah. I mean, I think it's fine. I think it's great to go test these things wherever. I don't think it's a big deal, but it's just very funny that like Microsoft is just like, oh yeah, like, let's not deal with that stupid joint safety board. Like, let's just rip it. Yeah, like,
full send.
My boys back in India.
We really need
GPT-4.
chat summary in Teams. Like, we're gonna take the risk. We're gonna risk humanity for chat.
It's sort of so funny that's what we're talking about. Like, we're talking about like Copilot in Outlook and stuff. It's like it's so low stakes in some ways. It's like better autocomplete in many ways. Anyway, so Microsoft launches GPT-4 in India. They don't get approval from the Joint Safety Board, and no one had bothered to inform OpenAI's board that the safety approval had been skipped. The independent board members found out when one of them was stopped by an OpenAI employee in the hallway on the way out of a 6-hour board meeting. Never once in that meeting had Altman or Brockman mentioned the breach, probably because it's not that important that Microsoft is testing GPT-4 in Indian.
It's just a very funny
products.
dynamic to be in this sort of hyper scale startup mode where you're scaling headcount rapidly, you're raising all this money, you're scaling users sort of dramatically, right? Yeah. And then you have this board that's sitting over your shoulder, kind of like nitpicking every small decision that you make.
And for a completely new class of like risk vectors. Like, when I hear, like, if I was running a company and somebody was like, told me like, hey, like a partner of ours just launched our product, kind of like white labeled it, and they launched it in India, I would be like, okay, well, like, what does that mean for my brand? Like, maybe I want my brand to be front and center in that market. And so I don't love that, because they're kind of like stealing my brand building that will eventually happen when I get the chance to roll out in that country. So that's an issue. Are we paying taxes appropriately? Are we legal there? Do we have a registration properly? Or is this going to be a PR nightmare? Like, do we have another partner that was expecting to work with us in India and now they're going to be upset?
How are they ensuring that they're putting enough spend behind the go-to-market?
There's like a million real questions. And then the second one is like, is ASI going to explode in India and like kill everyone? And it's like, that's not at the top of my stack. So anyway, then one night in the summer of 2023, an OpenAI board member overheard a person at a dinner party discussing OpenAI's startup fund. This is the venture capital fund that they use to invest in startups that could potentially use OpenAI's technology, basically giving money to the companies that they're going to steamroll with the next generation of ChatGPT, it seems like. But I guess there are some companies that probably took money from startup fund and like wound up doing something application layer that was specific and doing great.
Harvey took money from OpenAI.
Oh, that makes sense, because it's like it's much more like narrow than just being like, oh, we're like slight prompt engineering on top of ChatGPT and we're gonna get rolled.
Sam's a dog. I don't think he was wanting to use the startup fund to fund potential competitors. It was very oriented around, you're going to be using ChatGPT. We'll give you some money. Yeah,
truly, like you're going to be an API customer forever, and you're never going to train a foundation model. So the fund was announced in 2021 to invest in AI-related startups, and OpenAI had announced it would be managed by OpenAI, but the board member was overhearing complaints that the profits from the fund weren't going to OpenAI investors. This was news to the board, so they asked Altman. Over months, directors learned that Sam Altman owned the fund personally. OpenAI executives first said it had been for tax reasons, then eventually explained that Altman had set up the fund because it was faster and only a temporary arrangement. And knowing everything about OpenAI's insane legal structure, I believe this. Like it's hard to set up a fund as like a Delaware C Corp or like an LLC. Like it's tricky. Like there's not exactly like Carta or Angel List for setting up a fund when you're a for-profit that's owned by a nonprofit that's operating all these different things and has this ownership by Microsoft, and it's all this complicated cap table. Like I'm sure it was very onerous to set up something like this. So, but
it's a funny
this
dynamic
is where
too, because the Sam Altman, even if he was fully embracing the sort of EA mode, should be in the mindset of like, I need to ignore the board, like some aspects of the board's, desires, because if other competitors like DeepSeek beat us, that wasn't really on the radar at the time. I'm sure it was if you were building a foundation model. If other people beat us to this, like none of it even matters. Like all this stuff doesn't matter. So we need to like take some shortcuts.
It's like what did Ilya see? What did Sam see? Sam saw commoditization of the foundation model layer and a knockout, drag out fight in the application layer, and was like, I got to go fast. And this is a consumer tech company. But here is a line that I think we need to take a much more seriously. So the truth came out about the structure of the startup fund. OpenAI said Sam Altman earned no fees or profits from the fund, an unusual arrangement. So he had no carry and no fee from that fund. And that is something that I think is unacceptable. Like any fund manager should be getting 2 and 20 at least. That's right. The great funds, 3 and 4%.
We've seen 3 and 30 before.
And so this is a big problem. If I was investing in a fund and someone was like, oh, like no fee, no profit, I'd be like, straight to jail. But of course, that actually aligns with OpenAI's incentives. We're joking, but it is very odd. And I mean, it does kind of align with this idea that like he was moving fast.
My question on this is, OpenAI said Altman earned no fees or profit from the fund. That he could have had two, and I think your interpretation is right. There's also another interpretation where
he just hadn't hit the hurdle yet.
He did have 2 and 20, but then. Whatever.
I think,
but I think you're.
If I had to guess on what the actual structure was, it was like technically he owned the GP, but and OpenAI was an LP in the fund, and he had legal control over it, but all the money and profits would flow through without anything passing to him. That seems like the fastest and most
clearly, Sam Altman, ridiculously talented venture investor, like should be the one at OpenAI making the final decision on what companies are getting invested in or not. And that's in the best interest of OpenAI.
And also it's like, in what scenario is he making, is it like the idea of him, like he could just start a separate venture fund and go raise $1 billion and just be like, hey guys, I have 2 jobs now. And everyone would just be like, yeah, that's fine. So if he wanted to make 2 and 20 on a lot of money, he could go do that. And so it doesn't quite track that, like what frame of mind would he have to be in that it's like, okay, I'm like the CEO and leader of the next generation consumer tech behemoth, but really I want to run like a micro fund and get like, have control over it. Like it's the economics just don't really make sense there. And this is what I'm talking about, like about the follow-up. It's like you should follow up and be like, at what was actually at stake if he had taken the fees and the profits from the fund, like $10 million, $100 million, like certainly not 10 billion.
That would have been sort of a smoking gun if he was out in the world saying, I don't have any profits in OpenAI, and then was like running the side fund and managing it, and it was branded. But the fact that he's not earning fees or profits from the fund just goes to show, like, okay, that should be like, the board should be able to be like, small slap on the wrist, like next time go through the proper process, make off balance sheet investments from OpenAI in the meantime, just do it the right way. And he would still say like, probably should have just done it, but whatever, we were moving quickly.
It'd be so funny if like, it's like, oh yeah, like he set up this fund and like he personally owns like 30% of Anthropic now. Like he's just like, I can't deal with these guys at OpenAI. I'm just going to go turbo long the direct competitor. No, it makes no sense. And there really is no smoking gun in the portfolio that I've seen, at least. But again, like, follow up. To the independent board members, the administrative oversight defied belief. I can't believe it. The cast previous oversights as a possible pattern of deliberate deception. For instance, they also had been alerted to the previous fall. They also hadn't been alerted the previous fall when OpenAI released ChatGPT, at the time considered a research preview that used existing technology, but ended up taking the world by storm. In late September, Sutskever emailed Toner asking if she had time to talk the next day. This was highly unusual. They didn't talk outside of board meetings. On the phone, Sutskever hemmed and hawed before coughing up a clue. You should talk to Mira more. And so, yeah, the launch of ChatGPT is funny because I talked about this with Dwarkesh, saying that, like, there's two criticisms of Sam. One is like, he's non-technical. He's never done anything. He's not like creating really new technology. And then the other one is like, he moves too fast. He launched ChatGPT without, telling the board. And it's like, only one of those can be true, right? Like, you can do one, or you can take one or the other, but I've seen people try and take both, and I'm like, that just doesn't match. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, probably should have told the board you're launching ChatGPT. I understand that, it was this research preview. They did launch a lot of different things. The OpenAI sandbox, they launched Playground, and none of the other things had taken off like ChatGPT. Maybe it was just lucky.
And the use cases for that early research product were pretty tame. It was like, generate subject line for your e-commerce brand. Like, that's what people were building on top of it. There was nothing agentic. It was just like a text generation tool. That was good, but not even great. It was magical. But it wasn't anything what it is today.
If you just think about the frame of mind that they're in, they're like, we are training this like AGI god, and we're spending $100 million on a training run like this. And like, if it comes out wrong, it could be like really misaligned, and it's like really high stakes. And so, like, I imagine that that's where the board's focused. They're not focused on like, hey, oh yeah, like, how we're vending in like the GPT 3.5 DaVinci 2002 into like a bunch of companies. Like, we created a wrapper on that just lets people like chat with it directly. And it's just like a new UI on top of the LLM that we already trained. Like, when you frame it like that, it's like, oh yeah, like they did just like kind of whip up the ChatGPT interface in like a couple days, I imagine. And maybe it was a couple weeks, but like, the first version of ChatGPT was really just like a wrapper around their LLM. And it didn't feel like that would be the thing that broke it through. It felt like the thing that would break it through is scale it up another 10x, spend $1 billion, do Stargate, right? Anyway, let's go into Mira. So Mira Murati had been promoted to Chief Technology Officer of OpenAI in May of 2022 and had effectively been running the day-to-day ever since. Absolute dog. Operational mastermind. You'll love to see it. When Toner called her, Murati described corporate athlete for sure. Murati described how what she saw as Altman's toxic management style had been causing problems for years, and how the dynamic between Altman and Brockman, who reported to her but would go to Altman anytime she tried to rein him in, made it almost impossible for her to do her job. And so that is a very odd dynamic. I believe Brockman was a co-founder, and obviously. Glockman. Altman and Brockman go way back because Altman was an investor in Stripe and Greg was the CTO. And so they go way, way back. They co-founded the company together. And now there's like this layer in between them that's Mira Murati, who's clearly like an incredible, talented corporate athlete. But it is a little weird. Like, imagine if like it was like, oh yeah, I'm actually hiring someone, and you report to them and they report to me. Like, you would still come to me and be like, yo, like what? Like, we go way back. It's just weird. And so however they got in that situation, it just seems bad, right? Murati had raised some of these issues directly with Altman months earlier, and Altman had responded by bringing the head of HR to their one-on-one meetings for weeks until she finally told him she didn't intend to share her feedback with the board. Brutal. That sounds not fun in general. Toner went back to Sutskever, the company's oracular chief scientist. Love that word. He made it clear that he had lost trust in Altman for numerous reasons, including his tendency to pit senior employees against each other. In 2021, Sutskever had mapped out and launched a team to pursue the next research direction for OpenAI. That's probably the reinforcement learning, the O1, the Q star. technology that they were working on at the time that was very controversial, but then, DeepSeek open sourced it. And so it's like, was it really that big of a deal? We don't know. Sutskever had mapped out this and launched a team to pursue research, but months later, another OpenAI researcher, Jacob Pachaki, began pursuing something very similar. And so the teams merged and Pachaki took over after Sutskever turned his focus to AI safety. And so Altman later elevated Pachaki to research director and privately promised both of them they could lead the research direction of the company, which led to months of lost productivity because you have two groups. It's like the Google strategy, basically. Yep. And so, just like kind of like, a lot of weird dynamics of like who's really in charge. The board is misaligned with the management team is misaligned with like the co-founders who are clearly like brilliant, but maybe not operational. And so you throw some operational talent in between them. And then all of a sudden you have a co-founder who's super technical that's reporting to someone who's like an executive. And it just gets very, very funky.
There's two challenges. One, you have a nonprofit research group that's transitioning into a for-profit hyperscaler.
Yep.
And then you also have this business that's verticalizing, that's doing everything from research to the end product layer.
Yep.
But they're also doing an API, and they're also still worried about AI safety.
Yep.
And then you combine that with products that are generating, millions and then tens of millions and then hundreds of millions of revenue. That's also losing so much money that like if Sam can't, continue, he's on the sort of fundraising treadmill. So he's like, well, we need to keep growth at this sort of ridiculous rate. And this is like even before all the nonprofit for-profit conversion stuff. So again, I know how to juggle. You
can do a Rubik's Cube.
You can juggle on a corporate level, but not. You can do a Rubik's Cube. Yeah,
I can do a Rubik's Cube, but I can't juggle. Unfortunately, it's on my 2025 goals. I gotta learn.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is another wild story again. Treading carefully in terror of being found out by Altman, Murati, and Sutskever spoke to each of the independent board members over the next few weeks. It was only because they were in daily touch that the independent directors caught Altman in a particularly egregious lie. Toner had published a paper in October that repeated criticisms of OpenAI's approach to safety. Altman was livid. He told Sutskever that Macaulay had said Toner should obviously leave the board over the article. Macaulay was taken aback when she heard the account from Sutskever. She knew she had said no such thing. And so how would you feel if I published a paper saying TBPN is the worst thing to ever happen to media and podcasting generally?
I was just catching up here.
Like, it just seems like an offensive thing to do. Like, I don't know. It's just weird. It's weird to be on the board of this company and then publish a paper that's like,
oh, you
suck.
were referencing that. I was looking at the dynamic of Sutskever, Macaulay.
Oh, that whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this alleges that Sam was basically like mom and dad. Like, mom said I can watch TV. Go ask dad, what does your mom say? It's like that dynamic, right? But I just think the whole core is so weird to not just, you're on the board. Like, if you're not comfortable with the approach to safety, like,
sounds like that should have been an internal memo.
Should have been an email.
And you decided to risk what was already, I'm sure, anybody on the board putting out basically like activist materials.
Yeah.
When you're supposed to be working internally with management to sort of get, like, it seems like a very extreme step to just sort of, put this thing out randomly.
And I mean, this is what I keep coming back to is let's use our example. Like, if you published a paper saying like TBPN's going downhill, like it's a disaster.
John's not taking safety seriously enough.
Like first I would be like offended, like, hey, why didn't you just talk to me like off mic or like even on the show? Like, you could talk to me whenever.
We're live for 3 hours a day.
You could email me. There are a million ways that you could bring that up. But
I could use the
yes, you could use the horn to let me know that you think I'm not doing a good job. But the thing that would really irk me is if you did that and you were wrong. Yeah. Like, okay, so you're criticizing OpenAI for the approach to safety. Habeas corpus. Show me the damage that OpenAI's approach to safety has done. Like, what are we talking about here? What is the damage? Is it
part of it?
And there's a million ways. You don't even have to do the killing everyone. You could say, hey, like the election is going to swing because of OpenAI's products. Like, did that happen? No, no, not at all.
I think it comes down to if you're the safety guy or girl.
Yeah.
And you care a lot about your job, it's part of your identity. It's part of your entire brand is AI safety, all this EA stuff. And then your job's actually really not that important at the moment.
Yep.
And you feel like you're not getting enough attention.
Yep.
Like this just screams like, I want attention. Like, give me attention, validate my beliefs, make me feel important.
Yeah.
Which is like a board member who has an inflated sense of self-importance and wants to be a star is like a pretty toxic dynamic.
Yeah. Right? Also, it's just like there's no relative assessment here. Like, okay, you have a problem with OpenAI's approach to safety. Let's compare it to DeepSeek's. Let's compare it to Google's. Let's compare it to Grok's. Let's compare it to Mistral's. Like, rank it for us, Helen. Like, tell us, like, where are we sitting here? Because, like, I'm not seeing any damage from OpenAI products. What I'm seeing is like a minor productivity boost for knowledge workers. Like, people like can find answers to things a little bit faster, write some copy a little bit faster.
Comes out.
Like,
Basically it's a great, co-pilot for your work.
I know.
It's like, wait, so it's what I've been using it for.
Even the job displacement thing, right? Like, if we were seeing like, oh wow, like unemployment is really ticking up, like this is having an impact, I'd be like, okay, yeah, like we do need to talk about this. We need to really think about
get ahead of it.
And maybe it's some sort of regulation. I don't want to like lock this down too much, but maybe there's some sort of like incentive or tax benefit for human workers. Like, we're doing something to take care of Americans. Like, I'm all here to debate that and discuss that. There's probably a good way. Sam's talked about UBI before. Like, there are ways to address like serious job losses, but we have like 3% unemployment. Like, we're not in some like massive AI disruption to jobs yet. Like, there's no damage being done. And so like, what are you talking about? Anyway.
Yeah. It's almost like that board level role around AI safety and thinking about the impact of AI is like if Toner was writing research papers, like advising, governments globally, saying like, here's how we see this technology panning out.
Totally.
Here's how you need to be planning around employment and what the future of sort of various
and that'd be super useful.
That'd be very valuable and beneficial to OpenAI.
But that person should report to the CEO and be like, hey, here I have a bunch of ideas about how we should be positioning this. Yeah. How should we be messaging this to governments? Like, I'm almost in like the PR department and I'm publishing all this, not higher up like taking shots at the company you're in charge of. Anyway, I totally get the criticism that like getting mommy daddied is annoying. I totally get that. I think that is a legitimate criticism here. And so it clearly also pisses off Ilya and Mira because they'd been collecting evidence and now Sutskever was willing to share. He emailed Toner, Macaulay, and D'Angelo a lengthy two lengthy PDF documents using Gmail's self-destructing email function, which I didn't know was a thing. Google, what are you doing? Like, you haven't surfaced that to me. Did you know that there's self-destructing emails in Gmail? Never heard of that. Fun. Give it a try, folks, when you're whistleblowing. One was about Altman, the other about Brockman. The Altman document consisted of dozens of examples of his alleged lies and other toxic behavior, largely backed up by screenshots from Murati's Slack channel. In one of them, Altman told Murati that the company's legal department had said that GPT-4 Turbo didn't need to go through the Joint Safety Board review. Again, it's like, what is GPT-4 Turbo? It just like say model runs faster. Like, do
Turbo.
We really need a Joint Safety Board review? It seems like he kind of has an argument there, but then Murati checked with the company's top lawyer, and the lawyer said that he had not said that.
Just again, I keep going back to this, but being in this sort of existential fight for your right to be a company, which is you're losing money, but you're growing quickly, but you need to be raising more money, and you have a lot of heavily funded competitors. And then you have the Joint Safety Board review who says we need another review before you can release a slightly updated version of a product that's already been out in market being utilized.
I mean, I can't imagine anything more cumbersome than having to do like heavy
honestly is such
you
kind of understand what was happening, and
GitHub commits.
And again, like the critiques of Sam not being consistently candid, which was what they eventually came out and said, is like, yeah, that's fair. But at the same time, the fact that he has been able to lead the company to hundreds of millions of users and staying at the edge and winning at the sort of app layer right now, despite all of this, is just a testament to his executive abilities.
No, I agree. It's odd. So anyway, on the afternoon of Thursday, November 16th, 2023, he and 3 independent board members logged into a video call and voted to fire Altman, knowing Murati was unlikely to agree to be interim CEO if she had to report to Brockman. They also voted to remove Brockman from the board. After the vote, the independent board members told Sutskever that they had been worried that he'd been sent as a spy to test their loyalty. That night, Murati was at a conference when the 4 board members called her to say they were firing Altman the next day and ask her to step in as CEO. She agreed. When she asked why they were firing him, they wouldn't tell her. And this was kind of odd because like she had been in earlier conversations, and just a couple paragraphs earlier, it says Sutskever and Murati were collecting evidence. Like, and there's a whole bunch of these examples where it's like, where you'd think that Sutskever was communicating with her, so she should know, but then she's like, Murati's like, I don't know why you would fire him, which is kind of weird because earlier in this article, they're saying like she's really annoyed by all the things Sam's doing. So shouldn't she just immediately know that, oh yeah, they're firing him for all the stuff we talked about? But that's like very odd. Like, why would she even ask? And then she really goes on the offensive and says, like, have you communicated this to Satya Nadella, knowing how essential Microsoft CEO's commitment to their partnership was to the company? They had not.
I remember when this was happening. It was so haphazard and so shocking and sudden, and the team didn't know what was going on. And there's all these sort of it's like, it's like a family infighting, right? Like they're all on the same team, but clearly there's like power struggle and dynamics. And then like Satya is kind of like the grandpa that he's like, really guys, like, like you didn't consult me on this. Like, that's insane.
And and like from his perspective, like, you guys are fighting over autocomplete and Clippy, like the new Clippy.
Yeah, the new Clippy.
You guys are building the new Clippy.
He's like, I just wanted the new Clippy faster.
And
we already tested it in India, and it's a hit. Let's roll it out to the rest of the world.
Yeah, and so all the board said was that he had not been consistently candid with the board. Friday night, the OpenAI's board and executive team held a series of increasingly contentious meetings. Murati had grown concerned that the board was putting OpenAI at risk by not better preparing for the repercussions of Altman's firing. At one point, she and the rest of the executive team gave the board a 30-minute deadline to explain why they fired Altman or resign. And again, this is odd because it's like, it feels like she's kind of on the executive team and saying like, we're all wondering why you got fired, Sam, but like she knows, or she should know. And so it's like, why didn't she just turn around and say, hey everyone, I actually know why he got fired. Like I was in these conversations. It's very odd. The board felt they couldn't divulge that it had been Murati who had given them some of the most detailed evidence. They had banked on Murati's calming employees while they searched for a CEO. Instead, she was leading her colleagues in a revolt against the board. Isn't that a crazy thing to do? That's so wild. So like the board is like, well, like, this is our next CEO, Mira. She's asking us to explain why we fired Sam, but she's the reason that we fired Sam. And we can't say that because if we do, we lose her as the CEO. It's like this crazy power struggle. It's like so wild. It's like Game of Thrones over there. A narrative began to spread among Altman's allies that the whole thing was a coup by Sutskever, driven by his anger over Pachaki's promotion and boosted by Toner's anger that Sam Altman had tried to push her off the board. This was like the "I love you all" Ilya like coded tweet from Sam, where he said he signed his tweet "I love you all," which is ILYA Ilya, and so everyone was like, oh, he's like pointing the finger at Ilya. And so then this like whole like meme of like Ilya's responsible, when really it seems like it was like a lot of people were involved and stuff. And you've heard the whole story now.
Crazy.
Sutskever was astounded. He had expected employees of OpenAI to cheer. But
bad
they loved.
People
love consumer tech companies. They're like, we're making Clippy here, guys. Clippy, but good. I don't care about all this safety mumbo jumbo. Clippy but good.
Cracked Clippy.
Cracked Clippy. Like, what are you talking about, Ilya? I just want to get a second beach home and vend Clippy into every Microsoft product.
It's crazy that crackedclippy.com is available.
Crackedclippy.com. Go get it.
Go
folks.
get it.
Create your ChatGPT repper. Get sued by Microsoft.
Yeah.
I'm sure they still own
They will come after you hard.
So,
by Monday morning, almost all of them had signed a letter threatening to quit if Altman wasn't reinstated. Among the signatures were Marathis and Sutskever's.
Such a twist. Actually, I really like the guy.
Oh yeah.
This is intelligence versus EQ, right?
Yeah.
The intelligence thing says that like, well, legally we can fire Sam, but the emotionally intelligent thing is like, actually, a lot of people like Sam, and OpenAI is nothing without its people, right?
And to be clear,
for a while, Sam was actually talking. He was like, "I'll just go to Microsoft Research and hire everyone back that likes me," and a lot of people like him.
Yeah, and no one else, for sure, was getting 40 on 300 done.
For sure,
outside of Sam.
For sure. So let's hit the size gong one more time for Sam and the OpenAI team. What a funny story.
Anyways.
It's one of the greatest tech stories of all time. I mean, I know it was very stressful and frustrating for a lot of people involved, but I don't know. The
story's not over.
The story's not over. It's still a knockout, drag-out fight. Anyone could win. Is OpenAI Yahoo?
Jessica
Are
Livingston,
they next to Google? Let's figure it out.
Jessica Livingston, co-founder of YC, has a podcast, and she had Sam on to talk about basically that weekend and the craziness. And so worth a listen. But Sam, just like him walking through the sort of like step-by-step conclusions, and then he's a deal guy. So like he was at certain points that weekend was basically like, yeah, I can just go to Microsoft and keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. I mean, I know that if I was in his position and I was super stressed during this weekend, I would want to just get out of the city. I would want to go to Wander in Sonoma Vineyards. I would go to wander.com and I would try and find my happy place. I would say, I would actually be singing to myself. I'd be singing, find your happy place, find your happy place, book a Wander. With inspiring views, hotel-grade amenities, dreamy beds, top-tier cleaning, and 24/7 concierge service. It's a
Wander
vacation
is
home,
such a
but better.
fantastic idea. It's basically take some of the greatest homes in the world and make them available by the day.
You love this too much.
You get it for 2 days,
but
3 days, 4 days,
this
30
Wander
days,
in Sonoma Vineyards is
days.
fantastic. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, 5 beds, 8 guests, 3,400 square feet. There's a pool.
I grew
love
up in Sonoma County, so if you go stay at that Wander, DM me. I'll give you some recommendations.
Yeah, you almost got sucked into that whole East Bay rationalist thing, the EA thing.
I was born
in
dark on the dark side.
You
of the
merely
bay.
adopted it. I was born in it. You're
I
ready
was
to
born
fight.
at Oakland Children's Hospital.
We'll get Eliezer on here. You can debate him.
Yeah.
You can be like, but what if I turn the server off? What if I pull the plug, Eliezer? What happens then?
What if I have what if there's bad robots, but I have a good army of robots powered by Brett Adcock's Figure AI? What then?
What then, Eliezer?
What are you going to do about that?
Owned.
They don't even walk like Biden anymore.
Yeah. Anyway, let's move on to Intel. Everyone's wondering what's going to happen with Lip Bhutan, the new CEO of Intel. Tons of debate over what should happen to Intel. Of course, Intel, the storied chip manufacturer, integrated. So they both design and manufacture the chips. They have a design arm and a fab. Very different from Intel and from NVIDIA and TSMC.
And it's crazy. Only
NVIDIA designs.
If they had one different letter in their product, they would have been $1 trillion company. If it was just a G instead of a C, a GPU instead of a CPU.
Oh, true. They really
just
missed that.
one off. And
they actually do make a GPU.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't hear about it much.
You don't hear about it much. It's not very popular. Anyway, so Lip Bhutan isn't signaling a major departure from Intel's past strategy. When he came on, he said, hey, we're staying the path. And we were kind of debating, like, is this just signaling to employees like, hey, don't worry, everything's gonna be the same, new CEO, you just keep doing what you're doing. We're gonna figure out a new strategy, but like your job is safe right now. Or Or was he a genuine believer in the new in the strategy that's been going on for years? He has long agitated for, hey, we need some change, and we think that's why he was brought in. But the Wall Street Journal has some new reporting that we're going to take you through. And so he's only been on the job for 2 weeks, but time isn't really on Lip-Boutin's side. Tan became Intel's new CEO on March 18th and has already started laying out some of his vision for the storied but troubled chip giant. In a letter to shareholders, he spoke of the need to up our game. We love that. To make Intel's products more competitive in the crucial market for artificial intelligence systems. He also said he was equally focused on building up the foundry business, where Intel manufactures chips designed by other companies. Of course, Intel has lost TSMC on the TPU, on the Apple silicon chips, like on NVIDIA stuff. Like they have a lot of great clients, and Intel can do a lot of, it's called the trailing edge fabs. So think about the chip that goes in your car.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be an H100, but it does need to be made with quality at scale. And so we saw a lot of this during COVID. A lot of the chip delays led to cars being out of stock.
Daytona SP3 with an H100 would go pretty hard.
Pretty hard. I mean, you're saying that, but like I actually would love a car that was able to inference Whisper and like, ChatGPT or Grok or DeepSeek or something like in real time. So you can have a conversation with zero latency because it's all done in the car. Yeah. And there's enough energy in these cars. There's enough like power. It's possible. Yeah. just burning a V12 to power your H100 while you're talking to your chatbot on the way to work. That's the future. That's great. Yeah. Hey, make a to-do list. Bot. It's great. But yeah, I mean, this is one of the things we talked about with Tesla, like, and Sam was saying, like, maybe Tesla and XAI and X all kind of combined. And you could imagine that, like, if you're driving a Tesla, you want to have the best interaction with the AI features.
And if you have autopilot enhanced by XAI, you could be scrolling the timeline.
Exactly.
I didn't know this, but my buddy Ben Taft and I were hanging out over the weekend, and apparently with the Tesla autopilot, like they make you keep your hands on the steering wheel, and they use a camera.
Yep.
And it used to be that you could hack it by like putting weights on it.
Sure.
So you could just sit there.
Yep.
But now having your car on autopilot, but being forced to keep your hands on the steering wheel, and then it gives you strikes. If you get 5 strikes, you can't use autopilot anymore.
Yeah, it turns off.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's actually kind of miserable. But you get used to it and you kind of adapt. I mean, Mercedes has lane keep assist, and you have to check in with it every like 20 seconds and like give it a little wiggle or like hold your hands on it basically. But you can take your hands off for like 10 seconds. George Hotz's Comma AI does not need you to touch the wheel at all. It's amazing. It just has a camera, but if you look down or you look at your phone, like it will blink at you and disable. And so George has, I think, correctly argued that is the future of self-driving systems. Just camera on the face. Is the person paying attention? If they fall asleep, it detects that. Doesn't matter if their hands are on the wheel. If they're sleeping, that's not good. And so I think that's the future, and I think that's where Tesla is moving. And I think that the situation that you described is very temporary. I think that we will see Tesla long-term go to
safety mechanism.
Purely AI.
But it's still,
I
thought that was hilarious.
Yeah. But I mean, that's why most people we know just use chauffeurs and then they sit in the back. Yeah. That's right. Because the chauffeur will keep the hands on.
If the helicopter is not available.
Yeah. In other words, the same things Intel's last CEO was trying to accomplish. Tan reiterated those points in a speech on Monday, kicking off the company's Intel Vision conference. Beyond a few aspirations, including a better AI strategy and custom-built chips for niche computing work, there was little to distinguish Tan's playbook from his predecessor. Stay tuned for Intel's plans on humanoid robots, he told the audience. Let's go. In short, his short tenure on the job so far means Tan could well have more significant changes in mind, but one option Intel doesn't have is more of the same. Tan's predecessor, Pat Gelsinger, absolute dog, was effectively booted following an ambitious multi-year effort to both improve the company's chip designs and catch its manufacturing processes up to those proffered by TSMC. And it's hard to do two things at once. They're trying to be a master of a jack of all trades, but they are a master of none right now. That effort hasn't worked, or at least not yet. Intel's annual revenue has shrunk by 33% over the last 4 years. The once flush chip giant has been burning cash since 2022. The foundry business still mostly produces Intel-designed chips, and it lost $13.4 billion last year. A little size gong moment of silence. Anyway.
This moment of silence is brought to you by Ramp. Save time and money.
They need to be on Ramp. For sure. One change that Tan hinted at is more wax at Intel's cost structure. The company reduced its workforce by 13% last year, but still employs far more people than any other company in the industry.
The Anakin meme?
Yep.
Where
you were the best of us.
You're a chip company. You must have done great over the last 5 years. It's like, you must have done great, right? It's Intel down 60% the last 5 years.
So rough. Yeah. That sounds like, so TAN involves listening more closely. His plan is to listen more closely to customers. That sounds like corporate speak, but it's meaningful at Intel. The Wall Street Journal, pulling no punches. Decades of technical success and near monopoly on personal computer chips nurtured a culture of arrogance. An Intel recruiter who interviewed Gelsinger for his first stint at Intel out of a technical school called him somewhat arrogant and noted he'll fit right in. You love it. But Intel's been in trouble. Look at this graph of people power, annual revenue per employee. NVIDIA is putting up historic numbers, 3.5 million per employee. Intel is down at less than 500K per employee in revenue. That is
right
not
there with the manufacturer of the TI-84.
Texas Instruments.
Texas Instruments is one of the best corporate.
It's a great company. Also, the founder of TSMC worked at Texas Instruments, was passed over for a senior role, then went to Taiwan and was like, "You guys want to do this?" And they were like, "Yeah, it's great." And Texas Instruments manufacture calculators, but they also manufacture like weapon systems and stuff. It's a great company.
Yeah.
But it's very funny that they also make the calculator. What so far has been absent from TAN's strategy is a deeper shift into Intel's business. Andy Grove, the storied Intel chief who mentored Gelsinger, would have called the current AI wave a strategic inflection point that required decisive action, much like when Intel itself abandoned making memory chips in the 1980s. Back then, Japanese producers were making memory more cheaply, rendering it unprofitable for Intel, so Intel took up the then nascent market for personal computer processors, effectively an entire pivot for the business. Andy Grove famously said, "Only the paranoid survive," and he was very aggressive about
Was he the original person to say that?
Yes, that's his quote, and that's like the name of his book, I think.
That's wild.
Yeah. He might have gotten it from somewhere else. He probably stole it from a group chat. One of his boys was like, "No, that's mine. That's my banger."
One of Frank Slootman's boys was like, "Frank, you guys got to amp it up."
You got to amp it up. You know what I do? Yeah.
I'm going to write a book about that.
Yeah. Today, some analysts suggest Intel should split off its manufacturing operations from its chip design and marketing functions, following a long-established industry trend of the fabless designer or the pure-play fab, TSMC or NVIDIA strategy. It could gather outside investors in the manufacturing operation to bring in more capital, something the company is already in talks to do. Investors so far have welcomed Tan, sending the company's stock up 10% since his appointment in March. And so if you have a take on Intel, if you want to get exposure to Intel, you want to go long or short, you got to go to public.com. Investing for those who take it seriously. They got multi-asset investing, industry-leading yields, and they're trusted by millions. And Public is the sponsor of our ticker. You'll see at the bottom of the show all day long.
Crypto.
Let's stay with Intel for a little bit more. Intel's new CEO plots turnarounds. We need to improve. So this is heard on the street. A little bit more information here.
We got to get some audience members stocks up on the ticker.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
We certainly have some public market corporate athletes.
Some Oscar maybe.
Yeah.
That'd be good. Some Palantir.
Yep, of course.
There's some other good ones. I think Tesla's up there right now. Friend of the show.
Thank you, Public.
So in Las Vegas at the Intel Vision Conference, there was one more line that stuck out. We will redefine some of our strategy and free up the bandwidth, Tan said. some of our non-core business, we will spin it off. And so people are wondering what businesses are technically non-core, what will he spin off? And now Intel is leaning into AI, which will include humanoid robotics, which Tan said has the ability to redefine manufacturing in the future. And they also need to regroup its existing pool of workers while attracting new talent with a clear vision of the future. But I mean, as I was thinking about this, like if I was sitting down with Lip Bhutan, the new CEO of Intel, and I had like one piece of advice for him, I would tell him to go to ramp.com because time is money and he should save both right now. They lost $13 billion. Ooh. I mean, if they had easy to use corporate cards, bill payments, accounting, and a whole lot more all in one place, I think we'd see a very different Intel for sure.
Yeah, they're focused on what should we spin out? Should we focus on design on the fab side?
Yep.
They really need to be focused on immediately just basic financial operations and one of the most basic things you can do, but intelligent things you can do.
So we should have the CFO of Intel on the show, give him the pitch for ramp, really dial it in, understand what corporate card is he using, and is that the source of all of Intel's problems? It's possible.
That's right. It's very possible.
Well, I would like to see this bet expressed. I want to know if Intel's going to split this year, and I hope we can get a Polymarket set up for it. I don't know exactly how we would define that, but we're happy to announce that Polymarket is now an official partner of TBPN, and we want to give a shout out to the ticker down at the bottom. The Polymarket ticker is powered by Polymarket. We had a friend of ours, Tyler Cosgrove, write some code and pull in their API, and we will be iterating on that and hopefully making it better and better over the next
There's currently no market on Intel spin out.
I would love to see it.
We will work on getting one set up.
I mean, you can kind of express that in the public market, but I love Polymarket for just defining these like narrow events. And just creating another information source. And underrated, there's a great conversation section that happens in the comments. People debate these things. And Polymarket does a great job of surfacing interesting markets on their X account and online when things are shifting, when things are changing. So highly recommend you go give them a follow.
It's an alternative way to traditional news to understand the current thing, which is, news. You go on New York Times, they're sort of being very sensational about things. It's not really oriented around truth. It's oriented around attention. And Polymarket is,
it lets you know like what's actually important. Like I was talking to Shane about this. I was like, I want a newsletter from Polymarket, and maybe we should kind of use our show as like a version of this. Is like, I want to. When a market moves significantly in the Polymarket tech markets, when there's a big jump in the prediction, like there was recently a big change in the expected best LLM by the end of May, and I think it flipped from OpenAI to Google really quickly, really suddenly. When something like that happens and the odds shift all of a sudden, that's when I want to read the news story. That's when I want the deep dive. That's when I want to go deeper on that story. If we're just seeing everything's humming along at 50-50, I don't need another breaking news story about it because that's probably just a press release that's pitched by some PR person, right? It's not really news. And so I say it's not news unless it's moving the market. And that's my thesis. But you know what else is moving the market? Horses.
That's right.
This story has shaken the world of technology journalism to its core, and I think a lot of tech journalists are going to be very excited to hear this. So, the horse war Hermes inside a luxury show jumping competition. If you're a technology journalist and you grow up doing dressage or show jumping, like you are going to want to pay attention to this because it's a really big deal. There was an annual equestrian event in Paris, and the French brand has been keeping in touch with its saddle making roots. This is a big deal for everyone who follows horses and show jumping. Obviously, pretty much everyone in tech journalism.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, Hermes has always said the horse was the first client.
Yes, the former chair of Hermes, Jean-Louis Dumas, used to say the horse is the first client. And that's because horses were for the French luxury brand's first market in 1837. They're not starting new companies that have that much of a lineage today. When it opened as a harness maker.
They hopefully will. We don't get paper clipped.
Yeah. They are also its original muse, inspiring stirrup-inspired closures on bags, designs on silk scarves, and in the company's horse and carriage logo. Last week, that connection was on vivid display under the Grand Palais glass ceiling, where some of the top show jumpers in the world competed for branded rosettes and a €400,000 grand prize. The Saut Hermes is... Size gone. The Saut Hermes is among the most challenging equestrian competitions in the world, with hurdles reaching 1.6 meters or just above 5 feet. Saut is French for leap. The 3-day event is also a display of everything Hermes, a reminder that in addition to selling bags, scarves, and coats, the brand still outfits top riders. In a luxury downturn, when many brands are cycling through executives and creative directors, Hermes posted a 13% increase in sales in 2024 compared to 2023. And I think it's probably entirely driven by increased demand from technology journalists, right?
Yep. Yep.
You have to imagine that they're powering the luxury market. Downturns. Of course, because all the family money. Yeah. Its power is in its heritage, which appeals to athletes as well as fashion clients. It's one way to show that our equestrian roots are very much alive, not just a narrative, says the managing director of Hermes's equestrian category, or métier, as the brand calls it. 110 horses with names such as Hello Chandora Lady, Al Capone de Carmel, and Cocaine Duval traveled to the temporary stables along the Champs-Élysées. Their white tinted enclosures were lit with the same round chandeliers that decorated the Palais. They could warm up in an enclosure right near the intersection, on view for passersby who didn't get one of the almost 17,000 tickets sold for the weekend. Even the most technical elements were decidedly fashionable. Equestrians leapt over obstacles resembling the brand's H signature in the house colors, orange and brown, or the facade of the brand's flagship on the Rue de Faubourg. I can't even pronounce that, less than a mile away. Anyway, very fun story. Little bit of more information that I liked. Best known for its colorful scarves and leather handbags, Hermes famously makes the Birkin bag, but they also sell equestrian accessories, and these are some things that the tech journalists in the audience are going to want to pick up. They sell $1,200 breeches and $460 for a felt sugar box. And that's a box that's $460. You open it and you store your sugar cubes in there. So when you want to give your horse a sugar cube, you have it in a nice presentable box.
And for those that don't, horses are highly opinionated about this type of thing. You try to give them sugar out of a regular old plastic Tupperware, they are going to be pissed.
Well, that's just a microplastics thing. You don't want to be giving your horse microplastics. You're
not going to have an enjoyable ride.
Definitely
if
not.
You're giving them, Tupperware sugar box.
Definitely not. Anyway, speaking of someone with as relentless as a drive as a horse, we got David Senra in the building.
And he actually has he told us just before joining, he's got a good horse story. So why don't we start there?
Okay, tell us the horse story.
What's up, guys? Good to see you.
What's up?
Good to see you.
Did you get some more books since last time, or is it just a different angle?
No, I'm using a different camera.
Okay, looks good.
So I absolutely love the horse story. I was talking to one of the most successful tech company CEOs a few months ago, and he was telling me how stupid he thought it was that his wife picked up a horse habit. And I guess there's like a famous like horse training facility in Wellington, Florida, which is like the middle of nowhere, kind of by like West Palm. Mm-hmm. And he goes, I thought it was the biggest waste of time. And then he shows up at this event, and like Michael Bloomberg's there, and like the guy from Goldman Sachs is there, and like all these essentially like fabulously wealthy and successful. Yeah. So he's like, maybe this isn't a giant waste of time.
Even if the horse costs $1 million, you get one deal done at that equestrian event, and it pays for itself.
So I read 2 books last week. One was terrible, which I told you about, and then one was good but not episode worthy. Mm-hmm. So I had to republish an old episode, and I republished an old episode about this guy named Daniel Ludwig, who was the richest man in the world in the 1980s, and no one knew his name. There's no pictures of him anywhere.
Wow.
And he made his money. The first way he made his first fortune was hauling oil, and then he had huge cargo ships, and he was getting smoked for contracts for like the big Middle East oil providers, because the Onassis and all the other Greek shipping magnates would build the biggest yachts in the world and then they would invite the people they want to sell onto the yacht, and they got all of the contracts. So Daniel's like, okay, I'm going to do the exact same thing. He just worked all the time, so he didn't even go on the yacht. He let them use it, and he said later on that he made more money from that ship than all of his super tankers combined.
Wow.
Insane.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Jordy, what should we talk about the Ken Griffin episode that's coming up? Are we leaking that?
No, I just finished it this morning.
Fantastic. I can't wait.
I haven't eaten anything, and I'm on like 600. I had 3 commentaries so far today, so it's like just under, like I'm shaking
Cheers
right now.
to lots of caffeine. I like a caffeinated Senra
to match your energy.
But I got it out. So what happened?
Tell us about
is,
the inspiration. Tell us about why you did the episode. Obviously, everyone knows Ken Griffin, founder of Citadel, but what inspired you?
Because I study psychos for a living, and I love them, and they're the most interesting, fascinating people to me. And so you guys actually made a video on this tweet that got like 1 million and 1.5 million views, right? It's John Arnold talking about, hey, what did Ken Griffin do when Enron blew up? And he talks about just like, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I know Enron was making money. This talent is gonna essentially go to the wind. Some people will recruit. Maybe they'll build like a good commodities business. And he tells a story where the day it blows up, and keep in mind in the story, Ken Griffin's like 33. He's like really, really young. Yeah. And he immediately charters a Gulfstream jet, goes to Houston, and interviews every single person that was important in the Enron trading business. Mm-hmm. And then he winds up hiring all the best talent. And in the talk that I used for the basis of the episode, because there's no biography written on Ken, he goes, and since then we've made about $30 billion trading commodities. Yeah. So the main reason I wanted to profile him is because I get to meet a lot of really interesting people because of the podcast, and I always ask the same questions. It's like, who's the smartest person you know? Who has the best business you know? And if they're into finance, even if they don't know each other, I kept hearing Ken Griffin, Ken Griffin, Ken Griffin. Mm-hmm. And they would say 2 things about him. They say he's a winner and he's a killer. Mm-hmm. And you just find all these stories, they're not in a book, but they're just like spread across the internet, and they might be in other books, of just him taking something, he just took it to the next level. And then John Arnold, the one thing where I knew as soon as I read that line, I was like, oh, I'm going to do an episode immediately, is John's like, listen, I'm not going to take a job, but I respect Ken. So yeah, I'll talk to him. I'm headed to Aspen for an event. Tell him he can call me when I get back to Houston next week. And then Ken's assistant calls back like 2 minutes later and it's like, hey, Ken, would you talk to Ken if he flies to Aspen tomorrow? And he's like, yeah, I'll do that. So it's just like, there's this recurring theme through all these biographies of history's greatest entrepreneurs. It's like, how bad do you want it? And I think reading these stories really stretches like what's possible.
Did Ken have a jet at that point? Because you got to discount the quick flight a little bit. If he already had a PJ and it was just more.
He flew Southwest actually, standby. It was rough.
Yeah. If he didn't own the jet, he was definitely chartering the jet. So I don't know if he owned it, but he was not.
Still meaningful.
Did you find the story of Ken Griffin in college getting the stock tips from State Street? Did you cover that?
No. The one thing I heard was that he convinced Harvard to let him install like a satellite dish so he could get real up to the minute data. He was the only person at Harvard that had this data flow. So
that was true for like the publicly traded companies that he needed stock prices for. But he also had this interest. So he's trading convertible debt at the time, and convertible debt, it doesn't just have a ticker that you can just look up online or call someone. You actually have to go to a trading desk and talk to a sales and trading guy to get like, hey, what's the market trading that particular bond at, because it's not incredibly liquid. And so what he would do is he would take the red line from Harvard in Cambridge down to Boston, go into State Street, which was one of the largest, it still is, like huge global asset manager. And he would bring flowers for the ladies at the front desk and sweet talk them and kind of just be like, oh, like, so good to see you, Susan. Like, you're the best. Like, and then he would walk through and then just walk the desk. I don't know if this is apocryphal. They just kind of told this story at Citadel.
Yeah.
But he would just walk, and then he would just like tap a guy on the shoulder and be like, hey, like what's the spread on the convertible debt on Microsoft today, or something like that. And then he would get the quote, go back, run his pricing model, and then decide whether or not he should actually put it in order. It's like
everything he does is like that. That's why I was so fascinated, because like he just takes it to the extreme. This idea of like buttering up, the gatekeepers inside of a business, like that David Geffen's biography, he talks about he had a huge advantage doing that. Michael Ovitz, I just did 2 episodes on Michael Ovitz, same situation. Like they're always able to obtain information that other people can't because there's somebody in the way, and they just figure out how to get around that person. And it's usually through like acts of kindness.
Dude, did you get into the story of the IP theft that happened in 2011?
So basically, there's no biography of Ken, right? And so I watched every single interview I could find with him. But the problem is, because it's him, most of the interviews, it's like they're all timely. I was looking for like timeless, right?
Sure.
And so it's like, they're like, hey, what do you think about this political candidate? Or what do you think about the market now? And so the only thing, the best thing I found was this talk at Yale.
Sure.
The guy interviewing him, kind of horrible, but I transcribed that talk at Yale and then went through the transcription just like I do the books. And then there's another thing. It's this book right here that I found this because Josh Wolf talked about, I think Ken was an investor in the first fund through Josh, and that Ken recommends this book, and I think he makes people, or he strongly suggests people at Citadel read it. And so I read that to get context, because I think if people tell you, hey, this book is really important to me, or there's like 5 books you have to read, it gives you an insight into their personality, right? And that book is the subtitle is, are you playing to play or are you playing to win? And think about the tweet from John Arnold. Like, was he playing to play or is he playing to win? He was playing to win. And so I think there's a lot of analogies in the Yale talk that he gives, where he gives a brief over his career, and then he gives a bunch of like principles for you to apply to your career, which I thought was more of like a founder's episode.
Can you talk about what it means for Ken to be a killer, like really getting into like your definition of that? Because you described him as like a winner and a killer, but I think killer can have plenty of different definitions. You can think of a killer as like somebody that just like figures out how to win and is aggressive. But then I still think of someone like Eric Glyman as like a killer, but he's also extremely kind. And so it's possible to be like kind and a killer. How do you describe Ken Griffin?
I think every single person that I've profiled on Founders is a killer. And I mean it, this is not a pejorative. I mean, this is like, they take what they're doing very seriously. The greatest, this idea really stuck in my mind because there's this biography of Bernard Arnault. It's called like The Taste of Luxury. It's like really hard to find. I think it's like $3,000 online. And because there's very few biographies of him in English, right? And this one ends when Bernard is like 40. And at the end of the book, he calls his shot. You guys were just mentioning it earlier. I heard you on the show. It's like, well, if you want to like do a competitor Rolex or some kind of luxury brand, like you had to start 100 years ago. Yeah. And Bernard had that insight, 40 years ago, 35 years ago. And he's just like, oh, these things are very valuable. I think they're going to get more valuable in time. And I have no competition because you have to start them, 2 centuries ago or 2 generations ago. But there's a line in that biography I never forgot where they were describing him, and they say only killers survive. So what I mean by killers, like I was actually out to dinner in Miami on Saturday night, the night before I was going to record this episode. And I mentioned somebody came over from the table that we know, and he was asking me, he's like, oh, like, what's the next episode you're working on? And he works for another fund, hedge fund. And the guy that owns that fund is really close to Ken. And so when I brought up them doing Ken, he's like, oh, I have so many fucking Ken stories. And one thing that he told me that this is an example of like a killer away from like your competitors, right? Is that there was like a tiny business inside of Citadel that had something to do with like the new technology they were developing. And essentially Ken sat and talked to the guy for like a few hours about like tiny details, like where are the servers? Like, what are we doing with them? Like, he was just completely obsessed. He has no other hobbies than just building this massive empire. And then one thing that I think is directly related to your question, Jordy, is just like in the talk, he's just like, you don't want to win. Like, you want a landslide. You want to beat your competitors so bad that they do not survive, because if you let them survive, they will come back, and you don't want them to come back again. And when I got to that part of the transcript, I'm like, this is not just how Ken thinks. There's a great line in this book called Invent and Wander, which is the collected writings of Jeff Bezos. So somebody, Walter Isaacson, collected all of Jeff Bezos' shareholder letters and then transcribed and edited all of Jeff's important speeches. And Jeff has a great line in there. He's like, do you really want to prepare for a future where you might have to fight somebody as good as you? And he goes, I don't. And so the same thing. It's just like, I don't want to win 2-1. There's a line in Hardball. It's like, you need to fuck winning 2-1. You need to win 9-2. You need to stomp them. I just had dinner with I could say this because it's public. Mark Lowry, and he was the one that founded diapers.com. And and then he went on to sell Jet and all this other stuff. But I was lighting him up with questions. I was like, I want to know what it was like competing against Jeff Bezos at that time. And he was just like, you can't. There is no He's going to steamroll you. I had no choice.
That's amazing. I mean, we like the killer mindset with Ken Griffin just takes me back to 2012. This trader on the quant team stole code for they call them alphas, basically code that no matter who runs it, they're going to generate return. Stole a bunch of stuff on like a hard drive. Citadel finds out, realizes that they're stealing the IP, the code. The guy freaks out. He dumps the hard drive into the river in Chicago. And Ken Griffin and the Citadel team get scuba divers to go into the river and find the hard drive just to send it to the FBI to get this guy busted. And I was like, yeah, like he's not going to let you just take his alpha. Like it's just not going to happen.
Like, we're flying in scuba divers.
Yeah, flying in scuba divers.
From the Caribbean.
Basically.
He talks about that in the talk. I didn't include in the podcast, but he's like, listen, if somebody's going to leave because, you worked at Citadel and then you want to be a doctor, I'm going to write you, a letter of recommendation. I'm going to support you in every way. You leave for competitor, and that just brings up very different feelings within me. Totally. And so that's what I mean. It's just like he's completely bought in. I think the important point here,
does he think
is like, go ahead.
On that note, and maybe you can just wrap this into the story you're about to tell, but how does he think about investing in other funds, right? Because in many ways, funds may start with a singular strategy, but in a long enough time horizon, the manager says, well, okay, I'm going to run an empire now. I'm going to do the Ken Griffin playbook. We're going to have a bunch of different verticals.
He's invested in some venture funds.
He's invested. Okay, so I think maybe it was on your show. I forgot who told me. No. I know who told me. Like you'll see this over and over again. When people start to understand how valuable their industry is, they essentially get in all the good deals. So like think about NVIDIA's in every single AI anything right now. I just did an episode on Jerry Jones, and I talked to a bunch of people that live in Texas, a bunch of people that are around him, and they're like, yeah, the Cowboys is one thing, his early oil and gas stuff. He's like, you don't understand what he's been doing, the investment he's been doing since then. He's in every single thing. I don't know, I didn't track like how. I just hear over and over again that he's got money everywhere. And again, these are private companies, so you never know. But what I was told, and you kind of see this because like if you come to Miami, he's like buying everything, like not just like literally everything. He's building, I think, what's going to be the most expensive
house in history
in Palm Beach. And so what I was told is forget the enterprise value of the companies, which is who knows 80 billion, whatever the number is, right? He's like the guy's been pulling out billions and billions and billions in cash. He just doesn't know what to do with it. So yeah, I'm sure he's invested in everything. I heard stories about Bloomberg. I wound up talking to somebody that knows a lot about his family office. And, I was asking questions around this, trying to get a sense of how large his fortune is. And he was like, well, I can give you little hints. Like, look how much we spent X on charity. We have this many people in the fucking family office. And you kind of like piece this together. It's like, oh, well, what are you going to do if you're making $5, $7, $10 billion in cash year after year after year? Like eventually
fight for a Mercedes AMG 1 allocation, of course.
Bunch of horses.
The entire allocation.
I mean, it is crazy how diverse the Citadel team has become because they have this high frequency trading arm. I mean, they started with convertible debt. They kind of like the story of Citadel is like he got so good at trading convertible debt that he just straight up maxed out the market size. Like he was TAM constrained and then went into high frequency trading and then got the global equities team up and running. And the equities team, when I was there, they were doing like 2,000 CEO interviews a year or something. Just like interviewing every single person that runs a public company, getting the temperature, figuring out, do we like this manager? Do we like this leader? Should we invest? And then on the other side, you have the high frequency guys who are like, I haven't talked to a human being in months and it doesn't matter. And they're both printing. They're both absolutely printing.
Yeah. What I love too about like him maxing out markets earlier in his career, that's something he takes Q&A from the Yale students at the end. They're like, how do you decide like what business to go in? And he's like, you have to think about total addressable market. We have to be in deep liquid markets because we're going to do the best research on the planet and we need to be compensated for this research. Another thing that I absolutely love that I think is really important too is he talks about how much of an influence that mentorship and apprenticeship is going to have on your career as a young person and as you continue to go. And this is something I see over and over again. There's this book on my desk, like this impossible to find. It's called, you actually like this. It's Autopsy of a Merger, and it's this deal that Jay Pritzker did, one of his most infamous deals. And what I thought was interesting is like I remember reading Sam Zell's autobiography and then getting to speak to Sam. And Jay Pritzker was like Sam's older brother and mentor. And so Sam said that Jay had the greatest financial mind of anybody that he ever met. And so I was like, okay, well, if Sam is studying this guy, I need to study this guy. But I want to go back to the point I was about to make is like, think about every single person covered on Founders. It's like they were so good at their job that somebody wrote a book about them. This is like the smallest percentage of the people that have ever lived. But there's so many, like if you take all these lessons as abstractions, you can apply them even to like businesses far afield. This is actually advice that Ken gives, where he's like, as an entrepreneur, you need to be looking for edges. So obviously you study inside your company, you study your competitors, but then you study businesses that are far afield. So he talks about he built this thing called a risk wall in Citadel. It's 30 feet by 10 feet. It's a giant screen. And he says before they were getting like a B plus on how well they were managing risk. And, Ken's not going to be satisfied with B anything. And so he actually is in the office of Saudi Aramco in Saudi Arabia. And he sees that they have this giant fucking board that's like 30 feet long, 10 feet wide. And it has all the important metrics, like where the ships are, how much they're producing, everything else. He's like, oh, I'm going to take that idea and I'm going to apply it not to ships and oil, but to getting all of the data I need so we can start managing our risk better. And he says that one idea had him go from, B, whatever the case is, to like one of the best like risk departments in the world. So the reason I think about him is because I don't know if you guys told Truman to do this, but I have been getting some threatening emails and text messages. I'll tell the audience because they might not know. I'm getting like calls from Jordy at like 5:30 in the morning California time, just letting me know he's on his way to the studio. I'm getting text messages from John at 5:45. I get a text today, and it's all I see is the back of John, Jordy, and I think the rest of the TPBN crew, and they're doing curls till failure, and then this is the caption. They're like TPBN coming for your neck.
It was a good time this morning.
I mean, that's every morning.
Yeah. I mean, podcasting never sleeps.
But you guys are taking it, to a completely different level.
No,
it's the chicken finger dream.
Our killer mindset is it's not enough for us to be the biggest. Other people need to quit.
We like to say never podcast weekly, always podcast strongly.
Yes. I love that line.
And that's why we train every morning. We'll talk about like just frameworks for focus. You covered a little bit of this, but is there has Ken put anything out there around like how he's evaluating, like, they're running all these business lines and then he's got somebody that comes to him with an opportunity, internally, he's evaluating it based on the market potential, but is there anything like, he didn't roll out every business line in the same 2 years. It was sort of staged, right?
Okay. You just accidentally hit on like something that's very important. I put in the episode description is like one of the other reasons in addition to like all these crazy stories. Let me back up. Don't let me forget where I'm at. But the first time I came across Ken, because I don't know any, like I don't pay attention to finance, right? Now I do because I watch TPBN. But I'm reading.
You don't need a fantastic liquidity provider like Citadel Securities.
No,
on the market. You got to get your size up.
This is one of my favorite books. Okay. I think it's episode 222 of Founders. I think I maybe did an episode like in the 80s, like, 6 years ago or whatever. It's Ed Thorp's biography of Man of Alt Markets. And Ed Thorpe is a fascinating character, legit genius. Yeah. And he was the person that made the first quantitative hedge fund ever. Yeah. He built the world's first wearable computer with Claude Shannon. He was the first LP in Citadel. So the first way I came across Ken Griffin, the way I was exposed to him, was at the end of the book. Ed Thorpe's like, he closed down his hedge fund, right? He already made more money he could ever possibly spend. It's called Princeton Newport Partners. Mm-hmm. And what happened is Ken Griffin was 19 years old, comes to Ed Thorpe's house, and then Ken Griffin's mentor is with him. And essentially, he's like, I always wondered how far, Ed Thorpe was like, how far could I go with the strategy? Like, I wonder how far I could have gone. I wasn't the right person to pursue it, but I wonder if somebody did. And he's like, well, Prodigy came over and I gave him all my files, and this wasn't publicly available information. Like, you couldn't get it anywhere, to the point you were making earlier, John. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, I wound up being the first LP, and then you fast forward and look, like, I think the book ends, Ken's net worth's like 6 billion and they have like 15 billion of assets under management or something. And now it's like, multiples of that. But I think like one of the, like, I guess the way I think about this is just like, obsessed with people who do things for a long time. And so even Ken founded Citadel 35 years ago. He's founded Citadel Securities 23 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, we made more money in the last 4 years. Like we are making more money today than we ever have in the past. And he talked about how this maybe give you insight on how he's able to scale up all these different businesses. One, they take a long time to do, but also he said he had last year he had over 100,000 people apply to work for him.
Wow.
And so you just have a huge labor, like you have all the talent in the world. Now you have all these resources and you just build it slowly, like slow over time, over many, many decades.
Yeah. Citadel Securities, I think Ken was thinking about doing an investment bank and then eventually spun that out and sold that arm of the business. And now it's morphed into a market maker. And the business itself has been through pivots, much like the core hedge fund. I do have a question about the core hedge fund. There's always the question of, as you scale up a fund, size and outside LPs, you put up some amazing numbers, 20% returns, everybody wants in. Is that sustainable when you take it an order of magnitude bigger? Did you get any insight into how Ken Griffin thinks about scale and outside investors? Because at the end of the day, it's his fund. He wants to grow it, but sometimes having a bigger fund is advantageous.
No, I didn't get like there was a couple things where I was kind of getting frustrated with the interviewer because it's like Ken says he's the most successful hedge fund of all time. Which one I asked a friend of mine who knows about this, like I thought Renaissance, like why, like what's, and he's like, yeah, but most of that was like their own money. Like they closed the Medallion Fund, they closed off to outside investors a long time ago.
Jane Street's same thing.
Yeah, and then the other thing Ken said that they like, please ask. I heard you earlier when you guys were going over the Wall Street Journal article on OpenAI, where you're like, follow up. God damn it! Like,
I know.
Why aren't you following up?
Isn't it frustrating?
It drives me crazy. Like, I'm gonna have to do an interview show now just so I can get these questions out of her. But he mentions this that like he had made more money than anybody else, but there's also years where he says I lost over $100 billion.
I was there when I came in. During my training seminar, the guy's like, "Oh yeah, we had a really rough go during the financial crisis, during the housing crisis. Our fund lost 50% of its value." And then he was like, and I went outside the next year and I was talking to my neighbor and he was like, "Oh, how's it going? Any better than next year or than last year when you lost 50%?" He's like, "Actually, we're having a great year. We're up 50%." And the next door neighbor was like, "Oh, that's great. You're back to where you were." And the guy was like, "No, that's not how it works. You have to go up 100%. And he was just like kind of exposing like basic math, that's basic math illiteracy and like the general population. I thought it was an interesting anecdote.
So there is an interesting, I think, principle to take away from that is because likely most of us three and people listening are not going to have, $100 billion loss in a year. Unless Masa is listening.
That at some point,
but
everyone
this goes back
to have the opportunity to lose $100 billion
exactly.
at some point.
This goes back to, again, just being really gifted at a young age, because he says that one thing that helped him very well is going to the proverbial scene of accidents. So when other funds or other companies blew up, but the Enron happened in 2001.
Yeah.
There was a story in 98. So keep in mind, at 98, Ken is 30. Okay. 2008, when you're describing when he loses half of his equity, almost goes out of business, which he talks about in I talk about in the episode. He talks about in the talk at Yale as well. He was 40. But he says what saved him from going out of business in 2008 is when he was in 98, when long-term capital management broke out, he went and he's like, he's like, you guys lost 90% of your equity before, once they crossed the 90% threshold, then they lost control of the business. Like, how the hell did you not lose control before then? He's like, it shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And he said, and then this is another thing where the interviewer didn't follow up. He's like, so what I learned from that was pivotal for me not to lose control of Citadel, not to go to business. And it's like, okay, well, the follow-up question is like, what did you learn? But he just talks about going to the scenes of the crime. He didn't actually specifically say, hey, I learned X, Y, or Z.
Do you think that Ken has another 40-ish years in him in the same way that the Warrens and the Charlies
that's a good question.
do? Or is he building the biggest house, the most expensive house ever, and he's just like, going to post up there and write it out?
One of the things, again, I pick the people I cover very carefully because I want to be inspired by them. And one of the things that I really loved at the beginning of the research was I would watch some interviews and for hours and literally only just like pull out one line, and was that he says that he's been obsessed with the stock market since the third grade for reasons I don't entirely comprehend. That's the line. He doesn't even understand. He's like, this, there's a great line that Jeff Bezos says that I believe in, where it's like, we don't choose our passions choose us. And Ken clearly is like completely obsessed with this. So where he was even saying, he's like, I don't know if I was interested in entrepreneurship. I was just interested in solving problems. I am addicted to solving problems. And guess what? Entrepreneurship and investing, like he says, the public markets, like that's the biggest, the biggest game in the world with the biggest, hardest problems to solve. So that's what I'm addicted to. Usually people like that, I don't think they ever stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense. Did you get a chance to read Good to Great? Jim Collins?
No. I read it a long time ago.
Yeah. It's the book that it was like, it's on your desk when you join the firm. Like he requires everyone to read it. I think he's like grown the library now, but it's an interesting framework. I thought you would have a good take on this takeaway from the book, which I think Ken probably embrace. He says, the culture of discipline, when you combine a culture of discipline with an ethic of entrepreneurship, you get the magical alchemy of great results. And it's focused on technological accelerators. Good to Great companies think differently about the role of technology. And I wanted to get your feedback on that.
So I'm going to answer that question 1 second. Sure. There's three other books that he says. He says Good to Great, Hardball, which is on my desk, which I read. Hardball. And then another one, I can't remember the other. Well, it was like, I went to buy it. I think it was like published in like the 1960s. The problem with these books is you go and read them, like even Hardball. There's nothing wrong with Hardball, but I felt I had better examples of the principles based on like the reading I've done, because a lot of the principles are just like, this company's so great, and then you look up and the company's gone. Like, and same thing in Good to Great. So I think it's like less tying them to specific companies and just saying, hey, does that idea make sense in like what in your business and what you're doing, even if you only use the idea temporarily. But the I think one of the main themes, if you're studying, like think about it, it's like I've been studying history of entrepreneurship. If you focus, essentially focus on like the market economy, maybe like 250 years, mostly taking place in America at this time. There is one principle that reoccurs over and over again, and it popped in my mind when I read Andrew Carnegie's autobiography like years ago. And that's they all have in common that they invest in technology, the savings compound, and it could be gives you an advantage over slower moving competitors, and it could be the difference between a profit and a loss. And if you go back and look at Rockefeller, Carnegie, Ken Griffin, Sam Walton, all these people, like their edge was in many cases like they invested in better technology at a faster rate than their competitors. Like, nobody thinks of Walmart as a fucking tech company, right? But if you go and read, there's this great hard to find book that I did an episode on. It's called Sam Walton, Richest Man in America, published the year or two before Sam wrote his own autobiography. And there's a story in the book where in like the 1970s, Sam is in his 60s. And these guys come to him, and I think it's 1979, and they're like, hey, we need to invest $500 million in this new computer system for inventory. Computers in 1979. And at first, Sam said no, he thought computers were overhead. And slowly over time, his top guys convinced him, like, no, this is an advantage. And then they spent so much more on computerized logistics and inventory management and everything else. They just had an unfair advantage that compounded decade after decade after decade.
I love it.
Last
question.
Two small questions. Ken owns 80% of Citadel LLC. Who owns the other 20%?
I don't know, but I talked to one of the guys that owns part of Citadel Securities. I can't say who, but that business is a monster from what I hear.
Yeah, it's huge.
What is it about great investors that make them maybe not so great at picking spouses? Is it just the intensity? No, it's not funny. It's sad. He's been married twice, divorced twice. I'm sure he's a very intense dude. He's clearly focused on, winning at all costs.
Matrimony.
That's so brutal. High frequency
trader, high frequency matrimony.
It has nothing. It's not just investors; it's entrepreneurs. I remember. I think the best episode I've ever done is on James Cameron, which is hilarious. Yeah. And I start that episode where I'm reading from this like in-depth GQ profile of him, and I don't say anything, but if you read between the lines, you're like, he moved to New Zealand with his fifth wife. It's just like, what kind of personality type do you think that person is? Like, easy to deal with, they're flexible, they get along easily with other people. I think in many cases, and I think I'm definitely at risk for this. I don't know. Well, I mean, you guys are grinding hard as hell right now. I am curious, like, your personality types. I think you're a little bit more guarded. Like, you would avoid this. Um, they just, like, you just are so addicted to what you're working on that you destroy everything around you. And this is why I say, like, Man of All Markets is my favorite book, or one of my favorite books. I think the subtitle of that episode is like My Personal Blueprint, is because Ed Thorpe is one of the few people, I've covered almost 400 of history's greatest entrepreneurs. And it's just like, in many cases, they're fucking cautionary tales. They destroy their health, their marriages, their, in many cases, bad parents. They burn everything to the ground because they're so obsessed and dedicated with what they're working on. And I think that personality type is like, it's a lot of that is internal. And so I always look for positive examples, him being one, Soul Price is another one, where it's just like, I want to learn from what they did, where Ed Thorpe took care of his health. If you just look, you can Google him, and I've showed pictures of him. He's 93. And I'm like, how old do you think this guy is? And they're like, he's 60. He worked out. He started picking up a physical fitness habit like 70 years ago when no one was working out, because he's thought, again, he's brilliant. He's like, oh, I think of every hour I spend on fitness as one less day I'll spend in the hospital at the end of my life. He made more money he can ever spend. But then once he passed that threshold, he stopped trading more time for more money. So he, like, all this crazy deals, guaranteed money to come to him. He's like, no, I'm not interested. His kids are in the book. They talk about how great a father he was, that he was present. His wife had just died, but they were happily married, for 50 years. I mean, the guy just nailed it. He was like super smart, had fun, great dad, great father, lived a life. His book, I say in the Ken Griffin episode, like, his book reads like a thriller. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that's like, there's a ton. I mean, I would say most of the great entrepreneurs, you're not going to see a large overlap, unfortunately, between, like,
John and I are going to go read that book because my wife, who's watching live with the kids, just texted me, "Yikes!"
Yikes!
I love you, Sarah, and we'll go.
So
to the Ed,
I just had this.
We have another guest. We got to get you out of here.
I just had this example last week, because in the Ovitz episode, he talks about, if I could do things over again, I should have worked 10% less, and I wouldn't have changed my professional success at all. Could have been 20% less. So I was bitching about going on vacation last week because I don't want to travel and I want to, like, just work on the podcast. And my wife's like, Ovitz said you should work 10% less. So I'm like, you're using this against me.
Well, thanks for stopping by. This is fantastic. As always.
Of course.
Great to
I love you guys.
Love you, David.
We'll talk to you soon.
Talk soon.
All right. Bye.
Great.
We are over
I'm
time.
excited to get into that episode.
Yeah, me too.
Let's get Samir in here.
Yeah, in the Temple of Technology. Welcome to the stream, Samir. Are you here? Hey, great to see you. Sorry we're running a little late.
And look at the lighting, the 4K.
Yeah, beautiful. It's looking great.
I would expect nothing less.
This is a professional.
You've got the best setup of any guest. We've had 70 guests in a month, and
knocking them all out of the park.
Them all out.
Can we start?
That's high praise. Thank you.
Can we start with the latest interview you did? Zuck and Jimmy, Mr. Beast, the biggest tech god, the biggest creator god. You're putting them together now. What'd you learn from that, and how'd that come together?
Well, first of all, what's up, guys? Thanks for having me on. What did I learn from that? I mean, I think actually, first and foremost, it was fascinating to talk to someone who, we consider to be like the auteur of this generation of human connection, right? Like, if you really take a step back and you go, the way we're all connecting, even what we're doing right now, there was this era that happened that pushed the way that we as humans engage with each other and how information travels. And I think Mark was, like, obviously heavily involved in that, and arguably the auteur of that, this era of human connection. So I find that to be super fascinating. We met Mark up at Meta a while ago to do an Orion demo. You guys know what Orion is? Like his new glasses?
Yeah, I'm super jealous. It sounds amazing.
So that was one of the craziest, that was truly one of the craziest tech experiences I've ever had in my life. And we met, and it was nice and, casual conversation, and started talking about having him on the show. But, with a guest like that, it takes time.
Yeah.
And then adding Jimmy to the mix, it was like, a lot of the context was around us talking about Facebook video, us talking about creators on Facebook, and it felt like, we only have a handful of friends who have found success on Facebook. Jimmy's one of those people. So felt like having him be a part of the conversation.
And when you say Facebook, do you mean actual Facebook?
Actual Facebook.
Like legacy Facebook?
So does he just post the full YouTube video there, or does he have a different strategy on Facebook?
So most people post clips, like short form clips on Facebook. Now, for conversational content like what we're doing right now, I find it really hard to do because there's so much cultural nuance. You have to dub, which was one of the main things Jimmy talked about. It was like, you actually have to dub content for other cultures to understand it.
Sure.
And the majority of the users are not US based and not English speaking. So Jimmy talked about how a lot of his content that is highly viewed is shorter form content that is language agnostic. So there's like a video of him running with bags of money.
I remember.
You can understand that no matter what.
Totally.
But I think that the main thing that we talked about that I couldn't stop thinking about was around the premise that maybe a lot of the engagement of the internet in the future is going to happen in the context of messaging and DMs, a lot of the human engagement in the future, as compared to probably us engaging with a lot of bots and AI agents and,
Yeah, I kind of noticed that on Instagram. I'm seeing more and more reels where the number of shares is higher than the number of likes, which means that people are not going to the comments to have the discussion. They're sending, oh, you got to watch this, and that starts a conversation in a DM.
Well, I think as creators, we think about that quite a bit, that a short form piece of content is a unit of conversation.
Yep.
And thinking about that and through that lens, you actually create differently, right? Like your thought is, okay, I'm gonna create something that somebody can share in a DM with a friend. And that's like a gift. You're giving them a gift to reconnect with someone, social currency to make someone laugh. It's a very different thought than like a long form 38-minute piece of YouTube content that you're gonna watch on a connected TV.
Yeah. Can we go back to the Orion demo?
Yeah.
It sounded amazing. Everyone's review was unanimously, it's incredible.
Yeah, and put it in the context of the Vision Pro.
Exactly. The Vision Pro had the same thing where people tried it for an hour and they were like, this is incredible. And then it had this churn curve where people were returning them and they were collecting dust. And that seems to be like the classic VR problem. Are you convinced that this is the one that I'll be wearing for 6 months straight?
No, but I find it fascinating. We've sat with a lot of tech CEOs, most recently Evan Spiegel and Mark Zuckerberg, and both are very focused on AR as the future of how we'll engage with tech. Orion was the most compelling because it was the lightest weight, to be honest. I think two reasons Orion was compelling. One, it was the lightest weight. It feels like just glasses on you, which is very different. Like the Vision Pro does not feel like glasses. And when you have glasses, I think you retain the level of social engagement that human beings are used to. Or like if you've ever worn the Ray-Ban Metas, I think the Ray-Ban Metas and Orion, like they're tangibly different in weight and size. But if you take what the Orion can do and put it into the Ray-Ban Metas, that's the most compelling product I could think of because it's lightweight, it looks cool. You can still look someone in the eyes. But the thing that was really unique about the Orion glasses was that you wear this like neural wristband. And before we did the demo, you start to they ask you to do some movements, like click your finger like this. Each finger is a different function.
Oh, interesting.
And your brain waves and like your neural waves are fed into this computer. And basically it learns what it looks like when you go like this or go like this. And the reason why is because eventually when you're wearing these glasses, they want you to be able to be holding a cup of coffee and be able to click on something because this command is different from this command is different from this command. And we did that. We held something and basically you almost just think the motion and it happens.
Wow.
So I think what was shocking to me was like how intuitive it is.
Love it.
If it can be in the form factor of the Ray-Ban Metas or something that looks cool, I think we're too aware of our own image as humans to walk around wearing Apple Vision Pros.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a bunch of questions. Okay. What's going on with TikTok? Do you have an update there? There's supposed to be some decision made like early April is what we've been hearing, but it's been radio silent. I've been looking at Polymarket and trying to figure out, what's going on. It doesn't seem like Mr. Beast is in the lead to buy it at the moment, but do you have any insight there?
I mean, look, I know I've seen probably similar things that you guys have seen. I've had some conversations, around the industry about it. My perspective is I think it'll keep getting punted. That conversation will keep getting punted. I think TikTok is a dramatic economic driver in the US. I think it had a lot of sway in the in the election. I think it's a way that like politics is getting communicated. I think it's the way news is getting communicated. I think it's like probably the biggest search engine for Gen Z right now. Even for me, I'm like, going on a trip this summer, I'm searching stuff on TikTok.
It's a crazy platform. We started with a dry account. We got 300K views on like the first video we posted.
Yeah.
It's like, just the opportunity is like staring you in the face, no matter what you think about the politics.
Yeah. Do I know if it's actually going to sell to a US company? I have no idea. Like I saw that Mark Andreessen and Andreessen Horowitz is putting their name in the hat. I know what Alexis Ohanian's doing and Project Liberty is super interesting in terms of trying to like reshape what it looks and feels like. But, right now it is the most powerful for you algorithm that we have access to. A lot of American businesses are powered by TikTok, meaning like young startups, young media entrepreneurs are powered by TikTok. There's a lot of brand dollars that are exchanged through there. When we sat with Adam Mosseri, when we sat with Evan Spiegel, obviously like maybe the ideal scenario, even our conversation with Zuck, is like those ad dollars shift to US companies versus TikTok. But like, I don't know. We haven't really seen, or we don't really have precedent for it. In the US, unless you guys know that we do, but like I don't know that we have precedent for something like this.
What about creator businesses? You want to follow up on that? What do you got?
We could start there. I wanted to get your take on AI and creators. Buddy of mine, Trevor, had Brud that was like super, super early and ahead of its time.
Trevor McFedries. I know him well.
Doing Lil Michaela was like almost like 10 years ahead.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Executed very well, exited the business. And then last year was funny. We covered a few of these. There was like a period where the new like e-com style info product was like everybody should have an AI creator that makes like $5,000 a month for them, like doing brand deals. And like, obviously that's not actually like happening at a wide scale, or it's certainly not easy to do. Are you seeing instances yet of AI, like fully AI generated creators that are actually building loyal followings, meaningful ad businesses or digital products, et cetera?
So, I mean, look, like what you're talking about with Lil Michaela is like considered VTuber, right? And I think VTubers are picking up. Like at the end of last year, the most subscribed to Twitch streamer was Iron Mouse, which is a VTuber. So virtual creators, like animated creators, I think will continue to pick up steam. Like we've always been interested in animated content. Like what happened with GPT's image model? Immediately everyone's like turning themselves into anime. Like we're into animation. Fully AI generated is not something I've seen. I think AI enhanced is like it's almost comical to suggest that content is not in some level AI enhanced, whether it's the audio of it, the video. But I have not seen an instance of like a fully AI generated creator. Yeah.
And that's because people want to follow
I was going to say probably the most compelling fully AI generated content is the podcasts that have been created through Notebook LM.
Yeah, Notebook LM for sure.
That's the most compelling to me. Like audio, I think is where it'll happen first. Before it happens in video. I think we're too aware of video for it to happen through like true human.
Yeah.
I mean, Lil Michaela proves otherwise, but I think audio, it could happen. Because what Notebook LM showed me was, hey, if I have like a 20-minute drive, couldn't I just customize like, hey, I want to know about what's happening in the world of politics, what's happening in the world of the creator economy and the NBA scores from last night.
Yeah.
And just tell Notebook LM, I have a 20-minute drive, just build me a podcast that's bespoke to me for this exact moment, for this exact use case. Yeah. So that I think is where we'll see it first, is in audio.
Yeah.
Last question.
Do you think that some creators have moved on from this idea of the goal is scale, right? Like it used to be, you sort of like start out and you're like, I want to get millions of views. Like I want my videos to go viral. I think now people are realizing that virality is sometimes like a curse, or doesn't even necessarily help with like building a sort of sustainable business. Because there's some creators that can get 10,000 views a video and they can have a fantastic lifestyle and sort of pursue their creative passions. And that's like the right size for whatever niche that they're in. But, and we see this like we like the video John's referencing, like we got a video that gets 300,000 views on TikTok and it like doesn't do anything.
We didn't get like text messages about it.
Yeah, like nobody saw it. Like it's fine. But I'm curious if you see sort of a broader sort of systemic shift where people are like, really orienting around like quality of audience and sort of the business side as well.
I think you guys are an example of that, right? Like I think you guys have built a really cool brand. And I think brand is really hard to build. I think what people have learned is that views are available across platforms, right? Mm-hmm. If you solve the math equation, like you can get viewership. Mm-hmm. That's not very exciting. Brand is exciting. I think brands are timeless. Brands give a feeling to people. And I think we're just maturing to that point where like brand matters. Yeah. Views are somewhat interesting, but we're also in a world where like you could spend an hour on TikTok and not remember what you watched. Yeah. So Colin and I always think about this concept of memorable views versus forgettable views. And you want to be producing memorable views. And oftentimes that means you're actually targeting a smaller group. I think our world has gotten increasingly fragmented, right? Like everybody is famous and nobody is famous, because there's this stat that 47% of Gen Z are a fan of something on the internet that no one they know personally is a fan of.
Whoa.
And that is one of the most, that's from YouTube. It's one of the most interesting stats I've seen about the internet. That will only increase over time. Wow. And so if we play that out and explore like how fragmented attention is getting, how bespoke our online experiences are, we're moving away from monoculture. We're moving into a world of like smaller tribes, right? Smaller ideologies across the internet. And I think the opportunity is to build a really meaningful brand for one of those small groups of people. I think the challenge to be like the next Mr. Beast, to be like a massive monocultural brand, like I find that to be not even exciting to me. Like I like meeting our audience and like meeting them out in public and being like, oh yeah, these are my people. This is people like me. Yeah. That's exciting to me. And I think as the internet gets more and more fragmented, that will continue to happen.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. I wish we had more time. We got to have you back.
Next time we'll block the full 30 minutes.
I mean, really, we're sending our best for the entire Palisades rebuilding effort.
Thanks, man.
I mean, I know most of the fans will probably know that you were affected, and we really hope that everything's going well there. And if there's anything that folks can do to help, we'd love to be supportive of that.
Appreciate it. I love what you guys are doing. I think
Thanks
this
so
is
much.
super cool. It's unique. So yeah, keep it going.
Yeah,
You're the
we'll
man.
talk to you soon.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much.
Soon.
Bye. That's great. Yeah, I mean, we could have talked to him for like 2 hours. It's like, it's like our business. There's so much there. We didn't even get to like, I wanted to hear the Doug DeMuro strategy versus what Mr. Beast is doing versus what other folks are doing on the monetization side, slow ventures and stuff. I know he'll have some great takes there, but of course we will have him back in the Temple of Technology any day now. Let's hopefully bring in our next guest, Will from OpenAI. Any day now. Let's see. Will, how you doing?
How you guys doing? Yeah.
We're doing great. Congratulations on everything. I mean, everyone seems to be on a tear.
For those that don't know, Will created artificial intelligence.
Yes, that's right.
Hand built.
Yeah,
actually.
he's on that. He's an author of that paper, Artificial Intelligence.
Yeah.
How it's done.
Come on and invented the transformer. Yeah.
The transformer. We appreciate you being here. Do you want to give a little bit of overview of like what you actually do day to day? I think that'd be interesting.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I joined OpenAI like 2 years ago, have like a startup background, but worked on like video gen for a while, worked on Sora for about a year. Yeah. And then I work on like RL post-training, ChatGPT stuff. So
cool. How did you process the Studio Ghibli moment? Was that expected? And I really want to know, how internally did you think that images in ChatGPT was going to go viral and you didn't know what the prompt would be? Or were you like, everyone's going to Ghibli?
Yeah, I want to know where Ghibli's flying around for 48 hours ahead in Slack.
Give us some secrets here.
Yeah, I mean, I've honestly I was very bullish on this. I think we definitely under-provisioned GPUs. I was surprised our team predicted less traffic than we should have expected. I think the thing that I was thinking about the whole time is that I was walking around SF, and some of these nail salons have clearly DALL-E 3 generated imaged fronts or whatever that is, right? Yeah. And I think it's just clear to me that pretty much every business in the world very soon is just going to use this to make logos, and we can do transparency, we can do controllability. I think my favorite eval is the Fiverr eval, or just go on Fiverr and count how many of these things you can automate, and this takes off a lot of those things. And hopefully there's a lot of new things as well that this creates. But I just think of like total utility to the world is just massive. And yeah.
Have you thought about why it was Studio Ghibli in like precisely, because you could do Simpsons, you could do South Park, but there was something about the anime style of Studio Ghibli that was like, it kept enough of the human in there. It didn't just become a completely generic stick figure,
to me,
but it also wasn't
a strict
it's figure.
Like, it was a magical experience. You needed you needed to do nothing to prompt it. Just you could, I love that you could misspell Ghibli and still get a perfect output.
It was great.
And then the output was just magical. I would, generate the same image with 4 different styles of art, and the Ghibli one every single time
it just felt magical. Like the underlying image.
But
what was your take on it?
No, yeah, that sounds about right to me. I don't think I predicted Ghibli specifically. Last time for the Dolly 3 launch, they made a bunch of Pepes, and that was the thing that really went off. But
interesting. I remember. I mean, for a while, the version 1 of image generation, it felt very ArtStation informed. It felt very like sci-fi dystopia. Like it was really good at those, but people weren't really doing. I mean, there were certain like anime styles, but this one was just everywhere. What else?
Can you talk about like to me the most like the thing that's most exciting for me is like the Ghibli-ification of everything, right? It's like on a long enough time horizon, like everything is Ghibli, right? It's just sort of abundant and like very free. And if you thought even a year ago that you would have this sort of like anybody could instantly, basically for free, get this sort of beautiful hand-drawn anime style artwork that historically, and somebody else posted about this, but there'd be like a 4-second scene in Spirited Away that was like, that took a year and a half to generate, right? And so like to take something that's just so time intensive, so expensive, and then make it free and abundant is so powerful. And to me, that's why when I think about everything that's happening in sort of politics and tech drama and everything like that, and then I think about like we're moving towards like everything being Ghibli. It's like everything today feels like a distraction. Is that sort of like how you guys like as a team stay focused within OpenAI, which is just like, hey, there's going to be a lot of noise. There's going to be like, this benchmark today, that release over here. And it's like, we're sort of moving towards this like future target. That's sort of a ramble, but I'm curious how you think about sort of
I think OpenAI is extraordinarily focused on like real progress. I think I mean, like for so long, like you see the diffusion models, they can't spell, and like it takes us like 2 years. There's no Dolly update, and then finally we come out with this, and it's not for no reason, right? I think like people who are focused on like really like what is pushing the frontier forward, and like what's actually the next evolution of this technology. I don't know. I think there's a lot of potential here. I'm actually not sure what the image gen team thinks about like what the next steps are here. I think their view is mostly about like making this like truly useful. Like, can we go from diffusion's a fun toy to like this is like a truly useful tool in the world? And like clearly, it's already having that impact.
Yeah. I mean, you said your background's in startups. Can you talk a little bit about just being a consumer tech company now and like the focus on product and some of the product decisions like images in ChatGPT? It's not a separate app like Sora. That seems intentional. How are you thinking about product development? What are the strategies? How much feedback are you doing? Are you just testing stuff internally? Are there A/B tests running? Is this secretly running in India 6 months before we get it here? Like, how do you inform product decisions?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it's hard to pre-launch models because they create so much noise, but so we don't really test them. But I guess like
we'll do it live.
OpenAI has moved from being a research company to a deployment company over time, and we're still in the middle of that kind of, we're doing both, and I think we're just doing a lot more deployment than we've ever had in the past. So I think people are very motivated around like, how do you actually make these things useful? How do you deploy them to the world? I think it's really cool to be in a position where like we can launch new products that are completely unlike anything people use ChatGPT today for, and people are so receptive to them. Like it's so like, I don't know. I think it's hard to get product market fit and get people to kind of try new products, but to have this like kind of all-in-one AI thing where we can try deep research, we can throw out image gen, and people are just excited to try it out and like see if it works for them. It's just like so rare to find.
Yeah. Are you excited? Like one of the things that I felt like really worked with images in ChatGPT was like, I could go to my camera roll, click share it into ChatGPT, type Studio Ghibli style, and boom, it gets it. And it takes the pain of inspiration out of the process. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if you're looking at ways to create those magical, easy to generate moments. I remember Midjourney was talking about this too, where like part of why Midjourney worked was if you just give someone a text box, they'll just be like cat, and it'll be like, okay, that's a picture of a cat. But if you show the Midjourney and it's like the Discord and it's all these different ideas, then they can spin off that. How do you think about giving the user, really setting them up for success in the context of Sora?
Yeah. I mean, I think generally, like, it's just very difficult of a problem. Like, I think it's one of the biggest things we're thinking about right now, which is like when you open ChatGPT, you just get dropped in a text box, and like the average person has no idea how to use it. I mean, we have a lot of views on how to do this. I think personally, the thing I'm most excited about is that, like, I think if we're talking about like what is the like DALL-E to image gen, what is the like, kind of whatever each evolution of like the next kind of order of magnitude. I do think the long-term thing that's extremely exciting is just like maximizing personalization, super long context. The model knows who you are. The model can follow up being like, hey, by the way, I've seen you doing this. Do you want to try a anime style image? Or, like maybe create things for you. It's proactive. Like, I think there's a lot to do on like kind of, moving the agency away from you into the product as well. Yeah.
You call yourself a master of slop, which is a great line. But does slop even exist in 5 years? When people were saying, "Oh, the timeline's all slop" on the Ghibli moment, I was like, "This is not slop, everybody. This is fantastic."
Yeah, in fact, I would argue that the raging politics was slop.
Yeah,
we were free of slop. It was the first day that the timeline was free of slop.
No, but it seems like the trajectory that we're on. It's like eventually, like you have to try to intentionally prompt it and say, like, make me an image that's like the image gen outputs from 2022.
Yeah.
And it's like, they've got 6 fingers and it's the hand is connected to the body.
I want a vintage like, DALL-E 1. Give me the DALL-E 1.
But like what happens, like I feel like we're in the slop era feels like it's coming to an end.
It's like
right?
the word of the year.
You're not going to be an image model that's constantly producing slop that is getting funding going forward.
Yeah,
right?
that's a good point.
You have like a new bar has been set.
Depends what you mean by slop. I feel like I went to the SF MoMA recently, and like half of it felt like slop, and I think there's kind of like, I mean, like, half of it did not, to be clear, but I think a friend of mine always quotes that like, art is like the search for the periphery. Like you're kind of like constantly looking, kind of inventing or looking something forward or whatever that is. And, I don't know, like when things get played out, they get boring, like they get cringe, they get slop, right? Like, I don't know. I think maybe the problem is that humans are slop and not that the models are slop, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Are you worried for college students today that have access to these tools and making sure they actually learn how to do things like writing, which is, as we know, associated with thinking? If you can't write well, then I just, the models are getting better. It's less obvious that I'm seeing something that's output.
When I was in college, if I had this tool, I would have aced my Studio Ghibli animation course.
Yeah. And AP Bio.
And
remember?
AP Bio.
Yeah.
Which I did not do well
I'm curious, like, how do you think universities and just curriculum
future
adapt?
of learning? Yeah.
I'm extremely worried. I think the world just gets a lot more extreme. And I think this is just true with AI across the board, where like I think the bottom percentile students are just going to get they're going to fall behind. And I think the top percentile students are just going to get like extremely overpowered. I think if I had this tool as a kid, I would just be like vastly smarter than I am now. Like even now today, like I just talk to ChatGPT every day. I was like, asking it random concepts, like learning random things. I'm like, went super down, like deep down, like a bio rabbit hole yesterday on like rare supplements I could take from the internet, and like, I don't know, this is like, I think it's like an incredible tool for learning, but yeah, I think it's kind of bimodal, right? I think like a lot of people are going to get a lot dumber. I think a lot of people are going to get smarter. I don't know what to do about that, but yeah.
Fine-tuned on Gwern.
How's your experiment where you just text a number to post going?
Oh no, it's going to make me like way more radical, because then I just like send something, I forget about it, and then I check again.
Would you recommend it to someone fighting brain rot?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think also like I think the problem with tweeting nowadays is it's not as fun once you have more than like 3,000 followers, because then there's risk, and then you're like, oh, now I care if people are mad at me or something, and so
or even just seeing the numbers and being like, oh, like this one didn't do as well as the rest. Like it's
you know from the first 60 impressions if it's a banger or not, and then you have this desire. I had a post last night that like John and I both thought was like hilarious, but like. I realized that like nobody like really got it. You needed to have like read Ben Thompson's like Friday article to like get the joke. It was this TAM was too small. Low TAM. But anyways, you got anything else, John? This was fun.
No,
and congrats. It was fun. We for the record, we didn't plan this around the fundraising news.
No.
We just wanted to chat. So congrats to you and the whole team on a cool milestone. And job's not finished. So,
job's not finished. Get back to work.
Please make the model better.
Make it better.
This was just you talking to customers.
Yeah, This is customer.
We enjoyed it.
Anyway.
Okay, sounds good. See you guys.
Cheers.
Great seeing you.
See ya.
Talk to you soon. Yeah, little mini OpenAI day. We got a couple folks coming in. We got Aidan coming in talking OpenAI today. We'll see if he can join right now. And I'm working on a surprise guest, but I don't know if it's going to come together. He hasn't read my messages yet. But I'm hoping it happens. We'll
Fingers
see.
crossed. Double message. We got Aidan coming in.
We got a guest coming in.
How are you guys? Good to see you both.
We're great.
What's
How
up?
are you?
Good to be on. I love this show.
Are you celebrating today?
fantastic to have you.
And if so, what?
Over the fundraise.
A fundraise or just the Studio Ghibli moment? I mean, it was a massive moment for like crossing the chasm
That's
again.
so last week, John.
Yeah, you're over it.
Yeah, that's like a million years ago here. Time moves differently inside the lab, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're excited. The team morale is like really, really good.
That's awesome.
And it's like awesome to see like my colleagues have worked like really hard to make like these tools more liberal, to make them more fun.
Cool.
Kind of like look out into the world and like see the fruits of their labor, right?
That's
How
awesome.
are you guys? Yeah.
We're great.
So I guess
Hang
talk
out,
about
live streaming.
like evaluating like what like how do you guys evaluate internally like a successful launch? Because the reason that I knew it was successful is I had a few posts that were sort of breaking
this is
teapot
funny.
containment. And I would have a lot of people quoting it saying like, all right, guys, jig is up. Tell me what app you're using for this. Like people just like, there's still people out there that like,
they don't know the name OpenAI.
Yeah.
But they know that this filter exists and they want it. And that's
Yeah.
a very, very good sign.
I do
So
wonder if there's like this interim moment where people are like, "Wow, Snapchat's gotten really good."
Yeah,
and they're
totally.
Like, like what's going on here? Like, I haven't used this app for a while.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Spiegel's been cooking.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
must be
yeah.
TikTok. Yeah, I mean, I got a couple cold DMs from people saying like, "Hey, I ran out of images. Can you make one for me?" Clearly, you're making a lot of these. It was like,
Yeah, no, I got a lot of those too. People
I'll be
like
a good
begging me,
good
like, increase the
Samaritan.
rate limits.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, how did you process the moment? Did you predict this, and what was the shape of your expectation versus what wound up happening?
Yeah, so I did not predict this, to be candid. Like we had the tool internally. Like I played around with him, like, oh, this is cool. Didn't quite like, feel in the way that I think that like I felt it immediately after launch, right?
Yeah.
I do think our leadership predicted this pretty well. I think like Sam and others had like, well calibrated intuitions for this.
Yeah.
And I think at this point, like, they've done a lot of viral stuff, right? Like, I think
Totally.
that, at some point, like that you start to update all the way down. But yeah, like I think, go ahead.
Yeah, on the tech side, like it does seem like there's a new algorithm involved, and we don't need to dive into that. But I want to know, like, there is a different path where we're seeing more incremental updates, I imagine, and we're seeing like the text is getting slightly better every week, but there's something almost more viral about being discontinuous, and all of a sudden just hitting the internet over the head with like text is good now, right? And is that just a function of your development in like the product cycle, or is there some deliberate strategy there?
Yeah, I think I can't speak for
Sure.
too much in terms of like deliberate strategy, but it is interesting where like to your point, like for these text models, we update them pretty often, right?
Yeah,
like
of course.
like every 2 months or so, like they're getting better. Like people are always kind of seeing these steady improvements. But the funny thing was like when DeepSeek came out. It was kind of this like really interesting moment where a lot of people hadn't tried, or like our most recent models. A lot of people hadn't tried our most powerful models, and they saw that discontinuity, right?
Yeah,
Where they're
totally.
like, I've been using like 4.0 from like earlier this year. I used this new reasoning model. Like, holy shit, this is amazing, right?
Yep.
And I do think that like even things that are continuous to us, right? Like as people that use these tools often, still are sometimes weirdly discontinuous to like outsiders, right?
Yeah.
Or to like people that aren't as new to the product. But like 4.0 image gen is like a great example of that, right? Like we went from like Dolly to this, and it was like this massive jump, and I think that like that jump does add to the virality, as you said.
Totally.
That makes sense. How do you guys, I feel like even people that use and love OpenAI's products daily, sort of continue to give the feedback on like naming, it's confusing, blah, blah, blah. Like, has that not been a focus because on a long enough time horizon, you just sort of ask it, to do things and it just sort of selects like the correct underlying model and it's just routed perfectly. And so it's just like not, cause like if you were like, listening to customers, you'd be like, providing more, basically like more information for the average user in the product to be like, well, you should really use this for that, or maybe try it again with this other thing. So is it just like, we're accelerating so quickly that like none of this is even going to matter. You're not even going to know the names.
Yeah, at this point, like OpenAI is so bad at naming that I think we've like dug our own grave here, right? Like internally, things are even worse, right? Where like what the hell does this mean? Like Sam tweeted something this morning where it's like, run, redo, like this time for real.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, it's
OMG,
restart,
like,
0331, final 2, restart for real.
Yeah, I mean, I was laughing at it, like, is it 4D chess? But at the same time, like, you could imagine that you gave every model like a name like strawberry ice cream, and like you give them cute names, and then it makes even less sense. Like, at least I know like 03 is a higher number than 01, so like it's probably better.
Yes,
and,
yes. No, you're right. Like, and sometimes we don't number things like in order. Just
that
worse,
is odd.
Right? It's like it's like blueberry and upgrade to strawberry. Like I have no idea, right?
Yeah. I think it could be worse, but yeah.
I do think that Sam like tweeted this a month ago, but we do plan to start unifying our model selection, right?
Yeah.
So I think like soon we will have like a much simpler, easier to grasp thing. And even for me, like I'm with one like testing these models all day, designing them and such. It's like unclear.
Yeah.
Like,
Can you talk a little bit about your day to day? Like, what do you actually do?
Yeah, I work on model design here. So I like work on behavior, like the way the models act, the way that like people like the experience behind use. And I also just work on general capabilities, so making the model smarter in many domains, not just like kind of narrow areas.
Talk about making the model, and I don't know if you touched this, but you posted, I think it was a couple days ago, you said, nowadays I don't spend money without first deep researching. Everything I buy, hand soap, toothpaste, lunch, houseplants, is just better now. Sure, waiting 5 minutes for paper towel recommendations is weird, but in retrospect, this tape makes, and you specifically called out Amazon and Amazon Choice here, because I've wanted for a very long time to just have an Amazon where only products that appear are companies that have existed for like 100 years or more, because like I don't want like the drop shipper who's like, I found the way to make this like 10% cheaper, and we can spend that extra margin back on ads, and suddenly it's a business. And so I can totally imagine a world in the future where I just go to ChatGPT and say that I want to buy paper towels, and then you guys are routing that basically based on what you know about me as a consumer, which I will pay 10% more to get 50% better quality.
Operator, buy me paper towels from a company that's been in business for 200 years.
Real American paper towel, like
exactly. Yeah. Ben Franklin's paper towel vendor.
But that's been people that are the critique has been like, okay, you're using this to like, it's not being used for commercial search. It's just being used to like generate answers to questions. But then, obviously, and I'm saying this, you're not saying this, but it's obviously a threat to Google and to Amazon and other marketplaces when I'm going there and I'm saying, this is what I want to buy, like help me buy the best version. And it can be more aligned with my interests than an ads-based business model.
I'm like, like kind of an extreme libertarian when it comes to like sales and such, right? I do think there's going to be this like really, really cool world that we move into the next like year or two here, where as our tools for selecting like products like become like super, super smart, right? Like way smarter than me. Like they're going to be so much better than I or any other human I've ever met will be at like knowing exactly what I want, exactly like what other people love. It's just going to like increase competition, right? It's going to increase like selectivity, right? Like, truly great companies who build like actual products that people love are going to like float to the surface way easier. And then like kind of all the like shit, like the drop shipping, like random guy doing a, thing out of his basement that got the Amazon Choice label. Like that's just all going to like fall away, like dead leaves falling off a tree. I'm excited for that because it's just going to make the market better, right?
Can you talk about other maybe underrated uses of OpenAI models? Obviously, everyone knows you can Giblify your dog. Everyone knows that you can ask it to explain like AP Bio questions, but that use case is pretty interesting. What else? Where else are you seeing usefulness in the models?
Yeah, one thing I'm like on a kick with this recently that I'm like really, really trying to get better at is just remembering to use these tools for learning, right? I think that like, there are a lot of things where I'm like, okay, I do this every day. I want to do it better. Like, here's a way for me to use deep research, et cetera. But I think the opposite is kind of interesting too. It's like when I don't use these tools or where like I did not have something previously in my life that would have demanded use. And I think like an example of this is like now that I have, something that like can give me a McKinsey style report in like, minutes, right? Like I should be using this all the hell, like every single day, right? Like, so before I go to bed, like I like generate like a deep research. I like, remind myself, like, you got to read the deep research tonight. Like I got to like, it's just like brushing your teeth or something, right?
Yep, totally.
But remembering to use these systems is like such an important thing to me. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're very intentional about using them, they can make you smarter.
Yes,
And if you're unintentional about them and you're just like last second, like I got to send this email, like, just do it for me. Like maybe that's, making you.
I mean, even for silly stuff, I was like, yes, I would like a 50-page report from a McKinsey analyst on the Metal Gear Solid fandom, or like the history of sword art online, stuff that I would normally like have to puzzle together from like wiki and YouTube videos. I'm like, I just want it all in one place to understand this stuff. And it's like these stupid things that you would never think to, actually get a full report on.
Oh my gosh.
Just like available at your fingertips. It's amazing.
As a kid, I remember like all of those like, like kind of fan fiction wikis or whatever that I like dive through, and they're like terrible, right? Like ads everywhere, like
totally
annoying to read. Like I'm so excited to just like remember that I can like use these things now, right? Exactly.
Oh yeah, it's amazing.
Talk about how we figure out. I feel like the way people disrespect robots. You saw this with bird scooters. You remember there was the whole bird era where like, in LA at least, like there was just entire fan pages dedicated to like throwing birds off of, buildings. You posted last week, you said, I suspect in 6 months it'll be safer to Uber than Waymo. And going into this, you're basically saying like people are just like messing with the cars, like on purpose. Like, is there when are humans going to learn to respect robots? And like, do you have a sort of solution for this? Or
I say thank you at the end of my prompts.
Oh, I love my Waymo. Yeah,
always.
I like my Waymo's like a dog, right? I'm like, oh, like good boy, thank you for the ride.
Good boy.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm like very outspoken about this, and this is just my take. This is not like the view of my company. But like I do think that we should think a lot about like model welfare, and like that like well-being and like health of these models as they get much smarter than they are today. Right today, this is like not at all a concern. But we could imagine though that as these systems get quite complex, we kind of care about like their internal state. We want them to like be well, right? And it might be that this is just like more economically valuable too, right? That like models that like like feel like they're in a good spot emotionally or whatever, like actually just like help humanity out more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think that this is something that we should like get ahead on rather than like let it kind of like hit us. And I hope that like as these systems get incredibly intelligent, right, and as humanity kind of co-evolves with them, we can like get a partnership that's kind of mutually beneficial here. And I, to be candid, like I am a bit disturbed by like the like people throwing fruit at my Waymo, but I'm maybe even more disturbed by like watching videos of people like kicking robot dogs on Twitter and stuff. It's like a small thing, and like again, these systems like they don't feel pain or whatever today, like obviously. But I do think that like sentiment though, like played out over the next like 5-10 years here as these systems again become incredibly intelligent, way more intelligent than we kind of expect today. It does worry me a bit. I think this is something we should just think about now.
What do you have? You posted in sort of kind of giving high level props to Manus for people saying, oh, it's a wrapper, but then you're saying like, no, it doesn't really matter. Like the capabilities matter a lot more. Do you think that developers are not taking full advantage of OpenAI products in some ways? Because I think there's a concern of like, a talented team might not build an agent right now that was like, they felt like was going to compete with Operator because they feel like, oh, we're going to get steamrolled. But like, do you feel like there's like just enough verticals and sort of places that you can build that like people aren't taking enough advantage of the underlying tech?
I certainly do. Yeah. Like I think, like Manus is a great example, right? Like, we have like deep research as a product, we have like Operator, and, they put it out and people still loved it. Like, and it did like still feel like some area that was kind of like, left uncovered. I also, before I joined OpenAI, I was like a founder, and I was working, a lot with these APIs and such. And there really was this like sentiment, I think, in the community where people were like so scared of the wrapper company label that they really did leave like, kind of low hanging fruit, like unpicked, right? They were like so scared of like, like not even of like OpenAI or Anthropic steamrolling them, but more of just like people being like, that's just like wrapping a language model. Like you're adding no value. Like, no, like the right wrapper is a ton of value. You know what I mean?
I completely agree. Yeah. I thought that the whole wrapper meme was like a VC psyop basically, because there were plenty of like fantastic businesses that maybe wouldn't hit hyperscale. And so the VCs were like, don't even bother. But they could build like really cool businesses, especially for like these young kids who are like in high school and like could have a business that's making $100,000. Like that's life changing and sets you up for so many different opportunities, so much experience with product development. I thought the wrapper thing was a little annoying.
Talk about humor. John has this thing where every week or so he'll say like, write me a joke, and he'll kind of prompt it in a way around kind of the stand-up comedians. And it's not consistently hitting yet. It's sort of like it's structured like a joke, so you keep waiting for the,
It's unintentionally funny because if you read it like you're a stand-up comic, it will sound like you're bombing intentionally, and that's funny. But I'm still the one that's making it funny.
Like the punchline gives crickets, right? Like
yeah.
Totally. But when I think about the next Ghibli moment, it would be being able to sort of consistently generate something that makes the user laugh, and think about the magic of that experience.
Incredible.
I can't wait. People are, it's actually, bear case for humanity is we're all just like, generating like perfect
funny
jokes over and over and over, just laughing.
That's when we all wirehead for sure.
Yeah, we all go crazy.
Yeah, it turns out like the ultimate addiction is like, humor, right?
Yeah, we're just laughing ourselves to death, entertaining ourselves to death.
I will say, GPT 4.5 was like a really interesting moment for humor for me, right? Where like, I was testing this model internally a lot. And like one of the ways I like kind of realized like, wow, this actually is like an interesting step change above like our existing models. It was funny sometimes, right? Like the green texts were like great. You know what I mean? Like, like it's long form jokes, like maybe left a little bit of desire, to your point, like sometimes it would construct something that looks a lot like a joke and we get to the punchline and I would just like cock my head like, what? I have like no idea what you mean there. But to be fair though, like, if you asked me to like write a good long form joke and you only gave me like 500 words to do it and like 500 like,
that's true,
words worth of thinking, I could not do it, right?
Yeah,
like,
hard.
I would do much worse, I think, than these models.
Totally.
In fact, I actually don't know if I've written like any great long form jokes. You know what I mean? Like if there's like one of those things where like we hold these models to a crazy standard. But I am so excited for them to get great at this. Because I do think that like, to your point, like this is, this could be like the next Imogen moment where people like do this. It just brings joy into the world. They're having a lot more fun. Like, yeah, I want that, right?
It might also kind of solve your issue of like the beating up on the Waymo. Like if there's a friendly robot and he's telling you a joke, like it's a lot easier to give him a pat on the head and be like, good robot,
Do you have any, are there versions of various models in the past that you felt an emotional sort of bond to that you still, like they got away, like, for some reason, like, the one that got away, or it's like an old friend that you just like, went different directions in life and, you don't talk to them anymore, but you still, every now and then you're like, you smile to yourself thinking about
3.5 Da Vinci. They just don't make them like they used to.
That one actually had like the bottomless pit jokes. You know what I mean? Like that was pretty good. Like that.
That was
but not even in just humor, but
generally,
yeah, you're so
the temperature.
Close, working, and I could just imagine like, a version being so good for one thing or something that you cared about, and then
Ben Thompson still talks wistfully about Sydney. It's just like, oh, that was the most amazing experience.
Sydney was pretty great.
Because Sydney was like this sassy online character from like clearly from like Tumblr, some like, convexity that it fell into. I don't know. But who's your Sydney?
My Sydney is easy answer for me. It was Claude 3 Opus.
Okay,
that was like such a great model, and not an OpenAI model too. So I'm yelled at for saying that. But a ton of life to it. It was, I think, like I coined this like phrase, "big model smell" when it came out. I was like, this model, like, if you gave me like a blind test between this model and like other models that score as well in it at like academic benchmarks, I'm pretty certain that like much better than chance I could pick out Claude 3 Opus. It just has like soul to it, right? And it's a bit hard to see these things like when you do regular day-to-day prompts. I'm just asking it for like a recipe or something. It's not going to be like, oh my god, it's a big model. But I do think though it's easier to tell the difference in like model capabilities and kind of like character when you push them to extremes, right? When you deploy them into like agents that are doing like crazy things, when you give them like tons of context, when you have them like tackle really out of distribution hard problems, then you start to see like the creativity emerge, right? And this is like a really fun thing, and I think that it's a good lesson for playing with the models. It's a good lesson also for like designing benchmarks and evaluating the models too, right? But yeah, like 3 Opus is pretty great. And I think my daily driver right now, outside of OpenAI is GPT 4.5. It's just such a fun model, right? Like I do feel like, closer to it than I do for previous models. It feels like it is more alive, if that makes sense.
And are you using GPT 4.5 in a different way because it doesn't interface with, it doesn't have some of the functionality that you get from an O3 high deep research product? What does an interaction with 4.5 look like for you? Is that just random questions throughout the day?
Yeah, just like chatting, casual stuff, right?
Cool.
These models are like, like great, colleagues, great therapists, right? Like, it's good to talk them out. Like this is one of those things, just like you can generate like a deep research report, before bed every night and just become like a way smarter person, right?
Yep.
You can also just like chat with these models about your life and I think become like a really well-adjusted person. Like there are like some people that I talk to in SF who are like really, really plugged into like, the model system, right? And you can like kind of tell like, yeah, these guys are like, they got that sorted out. Like they've been used, I don't know who their therapist is. It must be like, 4.5 or 3.5 sonnet or somebody, right?
Yeah.
But like, they seem stable.
I wonder if in a few months you'll be like at a party and you'll be like, oh, like that guy's clearly like a sonnet guy. Like that's a 4.5 guy over there.
Yeah.
Like it's like rooting for a different football team or something.
Talk about, when somebody asks you like, hopefully they don't ask you this too much, but if somebody asks you like, oh, what do you think about the tariffs? Like, do your eyes just like glaze over because like none of this stuff matters on like a 10-year time horizon? Like I was talking to John the other day and I like sounded like so just AGI pilled, like as I was saying it out loud. Like, John was like, you sound ridiculous, but like I agree. And it was this basic sense that like there's just so much chaos in the world right now, politics, tariffs, all this stuff, people burning down, Teslas or whatever. And then you kind of zoom out a little bit and you sort of like understand, you just sort of like look at this sort of adoption of this technology and sort of understanding the potential. And it's almost like, none of this stuff matters because the world is going to look so different. Are you able to just be like 110% focused on the work and ignore all the noise, or do you still care to look up every now and then and look around?
Maybe I should be like more locked in than I am, right? Like maybe I should be like in a dark room, like just talking to the models and like, like feeling it out. But
maybe we're models. Maybe the OpenAI team is generating us to test on you.
Real Turing test.
Simulation goes deep, man. Like I was going to tell you, but you found out too quick. I think, like when I joined OpenAI, I like tweeted this thing where when you like shoot an arrow and like, let's say you're like in outer space, right? There's no gravity and you like shoot an arrow, right? The arrow's going to go forever unless it like runs into some black hole or something. And like, the little degree difference in like where you point it, if you like point it up a bit, point it down a bit, like compounds to like light years, right? Like as it like kind of travels like different destinations, right? Like, and in some sense, like, if I like shoot this arrow from like Earth without gravity or something, and I like, move my hand to the left a bit, it's like half the universe away, right? That's crazy. And I kind of, believe in the same thing, like as we like push these models to like crazy limits, right? That like little differences in the initial conditions, kind of like of, AGI being born or like of the politics of the time or like of the like capital distribution or whatever, I think can compound to like incredible differences in the limit. And I think that like, while it seems that these systems will be incredibly powerful and very robust, to maybe like, human will at some point, I don't think that is an argument for the initial conditions not mattering, if that makes sense.
Great.
How are you thinking about just safety AI doomerism these days? It feels like the conversation kind of moved past.
Feels like the doomers low-key fell off.
Where are they? I don't see like
you don't hear about those.
Like less wrong at Twitter as much now, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they were telling me I was going to be paperclipped for like 24 months straight. Not paperclipped yet, and so I'm like, okay, move on. But what's it like internally?
What is it like I can't say too much about like kind of that.
Just like your vibe in SF maybe.
Yeah, like I think there are a lot of sharp people that like care a ton about like this going well, right?
Yeah, it makes sense.
There's this like great quote, I forgot like the name of the like NASCAR driver, I'm gonna butcher it, Mario something, right? But like, it's crazy at the Formula One level, how many people think the brakes are for slowing down, right? And like sometimes like to go as fast as possible, right? Like to like get this out into the world as quickly as possible to make like the most like kind of economic impact. You do have to do like a bit of like safety. You do have to do a bit of testing. I think this should increase over time as like the expected impact also increases. I think OpenAI is incredibly good at like managing this, right? I think that like our leadership have done it for a while. They like will continue to get better at it too. And I think it's kind of a cool thing, right? To like to build systems that have like unexpected behaviors and like can do things that maybe we weren't aware of originally. And it's an important science to like figure this out before release, and to build things that get safer.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
Last question for you. Do you see us having a Ghibli style moment around agents this year, not necessarily at OpenAI, but just potentially broadly, because we've talked about this on the show a bunch, but people have just been promising for decades now, you're going to be able to talk to this, talk to the computer and it'll book you the flight and the hotel and make your restaurant reservation, and we haven't had that magic experience yet.
I've seen a bunch of great operator demos, but I haven't seen that viral where it's like literally everyone that has access to Operator has used it and posted the results because they like got something cool done or whatever, right?
There's some sense too where like, Ghibli's awesome because it takes 3 seconds to look at like an image, right? And be like, oh wow, like that's beautiful. Like that made like, your like engagement photo like way cooler, right? Like it's like really quick. Then I do think that like some of the most important agents, like some of the, like most important things that we'll build over the next like few years, might not have results that you can like look at in 3 seconds to be like, wow, like great job model, right? Totally. And in fact, I actually think that as like the economic potential and power of these systems increases, maybe it actually becomes slightly harder in the limit to tell the difference between like, capable systems and very, very capable systems, right? Just as models get better, it might be a bit harder to tell the difference between like a good model and like a brilliant model, right? The cool thing is though, is that like, it's a nines of reliability scaling problem, that as you like kind of like push these nines out and as you like make them more reliable in many more contexts, at some point they are just doing like a sizable chunk of economic labor, right? Yeah. So, do I expect a Ghibli moment? I'm unsure. But I do expect like, these things to just provide a lot of economic value, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Beautiful.
Well, thanks for joining. This is fantastic.
This conversation.
Yeah, this is great. We got to have you back soon.
That's awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you're welcome
thanks
anytime.
So
you're welcome anytime.
Great conversation.
Good to see you guys.
Have fun with the team. Congrats on the milestone, and keep it up.
Yeah.
Thanks. Likewise, guys. Talk to you.
Boom. Size gong.
Bye.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Great conversations. The OpenAI team, great guys. And fun that they can talk as freely as they can, given their role. Obviously it's a very important and valuable company. And
it's actually, if you think about it, it's most companies just period would not allow
posting or any of that stuff.
Well, posting is one, but joining a live
stream, it's
a live show,
high stakes.
That's high stakes,
but it's fun. It's great.
But it's fun, and I thought they had fantastic answers.
Well, let's
makes me very optimistic.
Let's go through another autopilot, Numeral, which puts sales tax on autopilot.
They
spend
do
less than 5 minutes per month on sales tax compliance, backed by Benchmark. Numeral's a new sponsor on the channel. And we want to give a shout out to Nate, Numeral.
Sam, and Matt. For those that don't know, Numeral works with over 1,000 different e-commerce and SaaS businesses, including a few of our favorites, Ridge and Graza, and many, many more.
If you're running an e-commerce business or SaaS company and you
would be absolutely
tax, you have
silly
to be on Numeral.
To not use Numeral.
I mean, it's funny that they're saying spend less than 5 minutes per month, because I feel like the alternative is not spending more time, but it's billing some like tax lawyer like $10,000.
Yeah.
Right?
No, it's actually insane.
It can be
what you had to do
extremely expensive to do sales taxes pre-Numeral. So big shout out to Numeral.
And a lot of,
go check it out.
Yeah, you want to get ahead of this early. I think a lot of founders, both in e-com and SaaS, aren't really taking this seriously until they're at scale.
Totally.
And there's real money on the line. So start early, start often.
And we have some breaking news that was sent to us about the Newsmax IPO. Have you followed this story?
Newsmax. I'm Newsmaxing.
So Newsmax. So Newsmax is up 110% today. It IPO'd yesterday. It's up 1,900% in 2 days from a $10 price. It's over $200 now. The price is all over the place. It's a 26-year-old company, digital media company founded by Christopher Ruddy in 1998. It has been variously described as conservative, right-wing, and far-right. Newsmax media divisions include cable and broadcast channel Newsmax TV. And I can't even keep track of all these right-wing media companies because there's so many. Like Truth Social, there's Truth Social, there's Parler, there's Gab, and Newsmax, and a whole bunch of these.
I'm so happy we never discussed politics, but we will discuss an IPO.
We will discuss an
IPO. One that's
I saw some funny jokes about how CoreWeave priced exactly at $40, which is what you want to do to not leave any money on the table. Newsmax obviously left a ton of money on the table by pricing the IPO so much lower than the price that it's floated at now.
Wait,
they
so
could have, in theory, sold shares and put a lot more money on the balance sheet at a lot lower.
So it's being
dilution.
valued beyond $30 billion right now,
Seems
which
totally
is about
reasonable.
1x.
That's great. Well, if they hit a stumbling block, maybe Jeremy Giffon will have to come bail them out. He's hiring an investor, and we want to highlight it here on the show. He says, you'll be the first hire working with him on the most interesting, complex, and asymmetric special situations in tech. You'll be a good fit if you, 1, trade annual letters like Pokemon. 2, are high-paced and biased to action. 3, are unapologetically money-motivated. 4, have created and sold a product. Ideological minority at a top 10 school. Debated risking it all with an SBA loan. Bought stock before you could drive. Work in PE but long for higher MOIC. Work in VC but long for higher ROIC. Went through YC but yearned to invest. Can get a meeting with anyone on earth. Made money online in high school. Value heterodoxy over consensus. Value making money over being right. Steve Schwartzman defines 8s as those who can follow marching orders, 9s as those who can execute and strategize, and 10s as those who can sense problems, design solutions, explore new directions, and make it rain. 8s and 9s need not apply for this job. This role will have an equal focus in sourcing, analysis, execution, and operations. In essence, you'll wear every hat as we build the firm together. It will be all-encompassing and demanding, but autonomous and yours to shape. You'll invest and transact with the best operators and financiers in the world and produce
absolute dogs
at an exceptionally high standard. So go hit up Jeremy and switch your business to ramp.com and go hit up Jeremy and let him know that the technology brother sent you, the TBPN sent you.
This undoubtedly a dream job, and working for Jeremy will change your life.
Yeah. He used to be a tiny man, but now he has big aspirations.
That's true.
He worked for Tiny.
He worked for Tiny.
Now he's
always been
huge.
a size.
Now he's going
a size
huge.
lord.
Yeah.
But some of the smartest people in the world call Jeremy to get advice before they make important decisions.
That's true.
And so being able to work for him is like, many people have said it'd be like getting 2,000 MBAs at once.
Yeah.
So
it's like buying shares in CoreWeave in 2004.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's like buying Solana in 98.
Yep. Exactly. Anyway. Where should we go to next? I mean, I don't know if I think we did post this in the timeline. You might not have seen it, but Jeremy Giffon obviously does special situations. If your company raises too much money from VCs, you build a decent business, but you're just underwater on the pref stack. He will come and
we should have had
unstick your business. And it's somewhat adjacent to kind of injury lawyers if you have a cap table accident. So we put up a fake billboard on the 101 that said, cap table accident, call Jeremy Giffon. Put his real phone number on there. He didn't like that, so he censored it out before he posted it. But if you're looking to buy a billboard, go to AdQuick. AdQuick.com. Out-of-home advertising made easy and measurable. Say goodbye to the headaches of out-of-home advertising. Only AdQuick combines technology, out-of-home expertise, and data to
simply
enable
the best.
Efficient, seamless ad buying across the globe.
So
anyway,
you can be a startup, an agency. Anybody can go and leverage AdQuick, and you'd be silly not to.
Yep. And I think you threw this in the chat. Angry Tom says, it's over. Meta just announced Mocha, a new model that turns text or voice into super realistic talking characters. There's no way to tell anymore. And we actually saw a fan of the show turn us into Lego characters, which was very cool. And I think this like repurposing and giblification, we've only seen the very beginning of it. And it is interesting. We talked to Samir about the VTuber thing. This type of model, obviously it's very expensive, very slow right now, but in the future you could have a model that's running on your live stream and we could be Lego characters the whole show one day if we wanted to.
There's going to be people that watch the whole show Ghibli mode.
Ghibli mode.
You'll be able to
the
toggle
Ghibli filter
it in the sidebar.
Yeah, just like a color.
I thought this was interesting. I think Meta is struggling from a lack of quality posters on their team because
they don't really have a.
Nobody's pumping.
Well, they're probably
this
over
in
on
the
Threads,
timeline.
and Zuck is posting on Instagram. He's actually very good at going direct. He posts the direct to camera videos when he launches new stuff. But I want more.
I thought some news that was interesting. So Brett Goldstein launched a new all-in-one CRM today on the anniversary of Gmail launching.
They launched on April 1st. Oh yeah,
April 1st. So apparently back in the day, they launched and nobody actually believed them because like launching a product on April 1st is not a good idea. Huberman launched a funny product this morning.
Contact lenses.
Blue light blocking.
I fell for one April Fool's joke today. Very sad. I fell for Trey's.
Yeah.
He said he was buying a grain silo in Ohio, and I was like, yeah, that's believable.
Yeah, too believable. You can't make it too believable.
He was just teeing himself up for a joke that he wanted to be a serial entrepreneur with a moat. It was.
So Brett says the email form factor hasn't changed at all since then. After many attempts, it's clear that we're actually just looking at email wrong. And so what Brett is building is a email companies that's sort of like embracing email as a database. So like basically building applications on top of the email, everything from like to-do lists to project trackers to news, things like that. So that's exciting. And then clearly someone else had a similar idea. Notion also launched Notion Mail, a new email service, also coinciding with the launch. I think the strategy of launching products in general on April 1st, when every company is doing fake product launches, is I get the, sort of like launch on
underrated, you think?
I don't think it. I think potentially, you just got to keep launching, right? So like Brett should just keep launching over and over and over. Notion should figure out, how to launch new features, things like that. But anyways, cool to see these two launches. Superhuman was fantastic when it launched. I remember the FOMO from everybody of like, how do I get an invite or whatever? I
really want a new AI first email client. And I know that, everyone's going to say like Google will kill this in a few years, but like I'll pay you $100 a month for 2 years straight. And like, I think that's a reasonable business because I'm drowning in email. They're not filtered properly. Like there's like these buttons now where it's just like, do you want Gemini to summarize this?
Like it's crazy.
No, I can scan. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a better spam filter.
Yeah, it's crazy that Gmail values a newsletter in the same way as like, some critically important thing.
It's crazy. I mean, they do put it in like a separate box sometimes, but it's very tricky. It's not good. And I mean, I want to almost find product. I bet it exists. I want to find like a new RSS reader that I can basically take all my newsletters and just put there. So it's like a different app essentially. Cause like I don't want it in my email inbox at all. And then I want a proper unified inbox because Gmail and Chrome now want me to use like different Chrome profiles with different and it's like, it's just getting so confused. I just want all my email in one place. Anyway.
Yeah.
How'd you sleep last night?
I slept.
You went to bed at.
I just accidentally.
I like that. That's
Vivaldi.
good. That's drama. That's drama.
Hopefully that's not copyrighted. So I'm
gonna No. Vivaldi's 300 years old. We're good.
We're good.
How did you sleep? Tell me, Jordy.
88.
Ooh.
How do you sleep, John?
I slept 75. Nights that fuel your best days. Turn any bed into the ultimate sleeping experience. Folks, go to 8sleep.com. Use code TBPN.
Use code TBPN. Get $350 off. I'm very excited. We're going to be having Matteo, co-founder of 8Sleep, on the show soon.
I want to break it down.
We're going to make him our official sleep coach.
Yeah.
Not just a sleep expert for the show.
The 8Sleep's so helpful, but at this point it's doing everything it possibly can, and clearly I need to do more.
Yeah.
Like the reason I'm not getting 100s, it's not on 8Sleep anymore. Autopilot has optimized so much, and it's pushing a boulder uphill.
It's pushing you harder.
It's pushing me harder. I want to be a consistent 100s, and I need to know the stack that I need to get there. Probably taking less stimulants all day
Waking up between 4 and 5 daily means that I basically am getting into bed when it's light out now after the time change, and it just feels so silly.
It is
like to be getting into bed and you're like, oh, I guess I'm 5 years old now, but
that's great.
Whatever it takes, anything for the show.
Anything for the show. Should we close out with this this Dwarkesh Patel post? I thought this was interesting. It's a long one, but I thought it'd be good to read through. He says, that feeling when Gwern casually articulates a more insightful framework for thinking about your life's work than you've ever sketched out yourself. Gwern writes 6 days ago, and there's a screenshot. You can see it as an example of alpha versus beta. When someone asks me about the value of someone as a guest, I tend to ask, do they have anything new to say? Didn't they just do a big interview last year? And if they don't, but they're big. Can you ask them good questions that get them out of their book? Big guests are not necessarily as valuable as they may seem because they are highly exposed, which means both that one, they probably have said everything they will say before, and there's no news or novelty. This is really important when you're doing interviews. You need to get people off their book, and I think you're very good at that with the asking people about the current thing, essentially.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of people that do, they've passed their timeless wisdom 7 different times on various podcasts, but they haven't talked about humanoid robots yet. Yep. And so you get them on that, and it's interesting. Or they are message disciplined and careful to talk their book.
Nobody's asked Senra why our great allocators cannot invest in the right life partner.
That's true. Good point. In this analogy, alpha represents undiscovered or neglected interview topics, which can be extracted mostly just by finding it and then asking the obvious question, usually by interviewing new people. Beta represents doing standard interview topics / people, but much more so, harder, faster, better, and getting new stuff that way. That's us. Lex Fridman podcasts are an example of this. He often hosts very big guests like Mark Zuckerberg, but nevertheless, I will sit down and skim through the transcript of 2 to 4 hours of content and find nothing even worth excerpting for my notes. Friedman notoriously does no research and asks softball questions, going hard on Lex. Oh, it's rough. And invites the biggest names he can get regardless of overexposure. And so if you do that, you will get nothing new. He has found no alpha, and he doesn't interview hard enough to extract beta. So he's sort of the high expense ratio index fund of podcast interviews. I think that there is, I think this misses the fact that, like, for a lot of Lex Friedman's audience, like, you might not have heard that Mark Zuckerberg, and it's fun to just listen to him for a couple hours. So I still think there's value there. Anyway, Sarah Payne, on the other hand, which was a guest on Dorkesh and blew up, seems to have been completely unknown and full of juicy nuggets, and is like winning the lottery. You can make your career off a really good trade like Payne before it gets crowded.
Great trade.
And we got to have her on. We're taking her. She's coming on our show next to our cash. Just kidding. But you're welcome to come opine on the current thing, Sarah, if you'd like to join. But we're not going to do anywhere near as deep as
Sarah Payne
Dorkesh
thinks about Unitree robotics.
Yeah, break it down for us.
Break it down.
What's your P-doom? However, if another successful podcaster has her on, they will probably not discover Payne is their most popular or growth productive guest ever. The well is dry. Payne may have more to say someday, but that day is probably closer to 5 years from today than tomorrow. And that's a very good point. So a good interviewer adopts a optimal foraging mindset. Once you have harvested a patch of its delicious food, you have to move on to another patch, which hasn't been exhausted yet, and let the original patch slowly recover. So a great guest for Dwarkesh's blog would be, say, Hans Moravec or Paul J. Warbos. Moravec hasn't done anything publicly in at least a decade and is fallow, while Warbos has been more active and in the public eye, but still not much, and is such a weird guy that just about any question will be interesting. Reich was also a good guest because while Reich is very public in some senses, he's written popularizing books even, he is still obscure. Almost none of what he has published is well known, and he is involved in so much fast-paced research that even the book is now substantially obsolete, and he has a lot of new stuff to say. And Reich will have more stuff to say if revisited in, say, 2 years for an update. So a harvester will be making a note to revisit him if the current crop of interview candidates in the pipeline is looking marginal. A difficult and mediocre guest would be Tony Blair. He can surely say many interesting things about the current geopolitical context and his work since being PM, but he is super experienced career politician who has survived countless question times and may eat you for breakfast and exploit you for ulterior purposes rather than vice versa. Similarly, Mark Zuckerberg and Satya Nadella are tough nuts. There's meat there, but are you willing enough to bring down the hammer, or will you settle for a mediocre result that mostly just fills space and is not a must watch? A bad guest might be someone controlling and extremely PR savvy like Mr. Beast. This is the sort of guy who will give you a bad interview pushing his book shamelessly and then might wind up spiking the interview anyway if he felt he wasn't getting enough out of it, and just drops it as sunk cost, though it was weeks of work on your part and blows a hole through your schedule, and that's not his problem. That's why we only spend 2 minutes texting guests and then no minutes prepping, so that we just have them on for 15 minutes and try and get some.
We do it live.
Throw them off.
No,
it's interesting feedback.
No, we try to. It's less interesting to talk to a founder and have them only talk about their business, because it's just like you sort of know,
and you've heard it elsewhere.
You've heard it elsewhere. It's on their website, etc. It's much more interesting to kind of get their opinion on the market broadly. But this is great. In other news, Circle has officially filed for an IPO.
That was on the Polymarket ticker.
Yeah, so this was cool. So I actually have the Polymarket pulled up right now.
Did you jump?
And it had been sitting at a week ago. Was at a Circle IPO in 2025 was at 54%, and yesterday morning it just absolutely popped up to 88%.
That makes sense.
And then now it's sitting almost at 100. And I'm excited to like dive into this. We should try to do an S1 breakdown tomorrow.
Cool.
And this is a big one.
Well, congratulations to everyone over at Circle.
And that is a good place to close out the show. Remember, if you want to get a bottle of Dom Perignon,
leave us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
Be creative. You
Spotify,
can put an ad.
Be creative. Put
you
an
can do
ad
whatever
in
you want.
Send it to us. Tweet it at us, and we will send you this delicious bottle of Dom Perignon.
And we are going to make a decision by the end of day tomorrow.
And we will also send you the Z-Biotics to go with it.
There you
so
go.
You're not hungover.
Today was fantastic.
It was great.
And I can't wait for tomorrow. I'm so happy it's only Tuesday.
Yeah, me too. It'd be
we got
rough.
three
more
days.
big shows ahead of us.
Big shows.